Creating bar.
All right, you're very welcome along. It's Wednesday morning. It is the 1st of March. Spring is sprung, right? We're all officially on board with the whole spring thing.
Is this the actual first day of
It is the 1st of March, yeah.
Jesus.
Well, I've noticed that the last 2 mornings coming into work, there's actually like a little bit of brightness in the mornings, which is kind of nice, rather than just feeling you're coming to work in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and it's definitely brighter in the evenings. It's just not warm. Yesterday was not warm, I would say. It was actually colder yesterday, and there was like a wind whipping in. And we know sometimes that it snows on St. Patrick's Day. You know, sometimes you'd be
Of course.
in Croker and you will be absolutely frozen going, why do they ruin this game by making it be here? And now they have it in January, which is definitely not cold. And maybe next year they might even have it in December. It's also not cold. But anyway, spring is sprung. Hello, everybody. You're very welcome. Kathleen's here, as you can see. Shane is here, as you can see. If you want to get involved this morning, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. We advised everybody yesterday just to cool their jets about Evan Ferguson. Just, wait until he scores a hat-trick against France and then we can allow it to take off. This was on the back of the transfer speculation that Newcastle were interested, that he was going to be a solution to their issues. But, I mean, that's nonsense. Really, from this point forward, it's only come back to me when it's Man United speculation.
Right.
Because let's face it, they can spend 120 million on Harry Kane, or they can get, something younger, but just as good, for about half that.
So
He's 60 million now, right? Man United, that's it.
100%.
Yeah. But wait, what are you saying? Are you saying, don't get on the hype train with Evan
No,
Ferguson?
wait until the official confirmation comes through that Manchester United are interested.
Get on, all aboard. All aboard. You were saying yesterday, pull the train into the station.
Yeah, it's okay for us.
Get that train going, guys. It pulled out from the station last night once again. I mean, the one question left here was, can he do it on a cold Tuesday night in Stoke? And it turns out he absolutely can. So Evan Ferguson, all the questions that we had for him are being answered. All aboard the train, folks. Forget about playing yourself down this whole Irish Catholic guilt, or relax, cool the jets. No, go for it. The man's the next big thing.
I don't think there's much Catholic guilt in the studio.
Maybe not. No.
I was very confused there for a second. I was looking around me being where is this train coming from? What side is it going to hit me from?
Yeah. So, all aboard. I think we gotta lean into this now.
It was just a tap in last night, though. Let's not get too carried away.
It's about the movement, Ger. Forget about the finish. Finish was grand.
Do we have anybody who can be a Matomo in the Ireland team? I was like, So it's obvious now he's got to start, right?
Yeah.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It would be a massive misstep not to put him in the team from kickoff, and not to announce that the week in advance. That's what you can still buy tickets, I think, or certainly on my Instagram a couple of days ago they were still advertising a package, a 2-game package. But if they just come out and said, listen lads, Evan Ferguson's in the team, come along, I mean, there'd be no tickets left.
It's the equivalent of the Haaland tickets. Of course, Haaland didn't show up.
That worked out very well for everyone who bought tickets, myself included.
Unfortunately, wasn't involved for Norway that night. But yeah, Evan Ferguson was going to sell tickets, isn't he?
But do you want to do that as well? Are we putting him in, announcing it a week ahead, building the hype train, and then him not having a great performance on the night? Are we going to give him a little bit of leeway to maybe ease into it a little bit more?
I was concerned that he couldn't deal with pressure because he's so young, but he absolutely can.
We're playing France, though. We don't really expect to win. I think if we don't get hammered by France and put in a reasonable performance, people will be relatively accepting of that. So long as there's some level of ambition, some level of organisation and hard work, and they don't score from set pieces, and we cause trouble from set pieces, and all the things, all the hallmarks of a team that is coached well, which we that's what we expect from them. I think you got to put them in.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. It's more just do we build it up that much, a week ahead of him? I mean, we've already been building up for the last couple of weeks, but in an Irish context, do we put that weight on his shoulders as a country that is very good at putting weight on young people's shoulders, and then them maybe not living up to that weight?
But yours is supposed to be the generation to change all that shit, right? We're the number one rugby team in the world. What are you talking about?
True, yeah.
I was more thinking just purely in a soccer context, but now I feel like I'm having an existential crisis about the rest of my life.
Yeah, come on, you guys can carry the weight.
Pressure for tires, hey. That's what they say.
Pressure
Or bouncy castles.
Yeah.
I've heard that
privilege.
before.
Pressure is a privilege. Evan Ferguson, look, he's well. Look, Matoma has been a key cog in the whole Ferguson form as well. But maybe we can find someone to link up with him. There's a bit of an Overmars Henry stench off Matoma and Ferguson at the moment. They're brilliant. The pair of them together, like.
So far, we've compared him to Haaland and now Thierry Henry and Harry Kane.
Yeah.
And it's 5.5 minutes into the show, so you can have your say in the YouTube comments.
We're not getting too carried away, are we? No, it's fine.
Oh, but you're supposed to get carried away.
Yeah.
When, like, why not? That's like, this is
It's almost like he was watching the show yesterday and he heard you say, Jerry, we're not going to get on the hype train. We're going to park it up. And then he was just like, no, you know what? I'm enjoying the hype. I'm gonna give them something else to talk about.
Yeah.
Free yourself from the shackles.
The question is now really though, like, who is the best partner for him? What is the best formation to get the best out of this? Like, how do we do a little bit of, obviously we're nowhere near the standard of the rest of the team, the depth that they have at Brighton. But what is the team that you pick around him? Like,
are we at that stage? Are we at the stage of completely picking a team around him?
I mean, yeah. Like,
you have to shape a team around him, don't you? We were talking on the show yesterday morning. We're like, will he actually start? We all want him to start, but will
this is
he
what
actually
I mean, because
start?
we're going from does he actually start to, okay, we're picking a team around him, and as you say, we're about 6.5 minutes into the show.
Life comes at you fast.
well, so obviously there is now a recognised shape that Ireland play to, which was designed to play to our strengths. We had a bunch of centre backs. We have good wing backs. And we were short numbers around the rest of the field. Like, traditionally, Stephen Kenny, when he was at his peak before he became an Ireland manager, wouldn't have played with the three centre backs. So perhaps at some point he goes back to not playing three centre backs. But I think at the moment, particularly against France, given that that's the formation that we've played most almost entirely since he went to three at the back, we'll play three at the back, and we'll have. I think we'll play three at the back. There's only pick a team in the papers today, and it wasn't. I'd be amazed if he didn't. But then you can play somebody up front with Ferguson, and Obafemi come off the bench and scored at the weekend.
Yeah.
So
Ogbenya scoring, like they're all coming into a little bit of form.
Yeah, but it has to be like, who's the best partner for Evan Ferguson, because he's the standout crop, or the standout player in that crop of young talent coming through. And like, get him in the team. When Robbie Keane was Robbie Keane at a similar age, like, is it fair to say Evan Ferguson is actually more advanced? He might be a year behind because Robbie was 17, but Robbie was doing it in the Championship and then went to Italy and then came back to Coventry. Like, this is actually in the Premier League at 18.
Top half team.
Okay, fairness, last night was in the Cup and I get it was against Stoke, but he's
It's still consistency though as well.
Yeah, and he's a fixture in a team that has Premier League resources and Premier League scouting and the pick of the world's best young talent.
Oh,
like Brighton could go and spend 30 million on a striker if they wanted to, but they ain't doing it because they've got this guy.
They don't need him. The Zerbi spoke so glowingly about him after the match last night. They were like,
I didn't see that. So
he's unique. He is very, very unique in his talents. Like the work he does off the ball, the movement he has as well, and he demonstrates it game on game. That's 4 goals in 9, I think, for Evan, 5 for the season. Like, and of course he had the injury as well. So he's just coming to form at the right time. Like, even for his celebration last night, you're seeing Caicedo and World Cup winner Alexis McAllister coming over and high-fiving him. You're thinking, this guy is getting so much unbelievable experience week on week. We're going to benefit from it.
Is he the most consistent performer in the Irish squad at the moment?
Has to be, doesn't it?
At that level?
Certainly at that level.
Well, the other one who is consistently good week in, week out at the moment is Seamus Coleman, who hasn't been a fixture in the team even when, there's been bits where he's been injured and he hasn't been picked. And so I think he's got to go straight back in the team as well. There's some talk that we might get game time from Doherty this weekend. I still think that my favourite team would be Doherty left wing back, Seamus Coleman right wing back, and then you've got Collins, even though he's not playing football at the moment, in the team as well, adding an extra body in midfield when you need it. But then, like, who are your midfielders? So Malumbi's back, was dropped, got back in the team, and seems to be a favoured son as well of Stephen Kenny. Maybe we'll get Nathan to pick his team over the next few days.
The exact quotes from the Zerbi last night, interestingly, of Ferguson. He said, "He is unique for us in terms of quality, in terms of characteristic. He knows very well the way to score. I think he can and he has to improve in the quality of his play in ball possession to keep the ball better. But he is 18, he was born in 2004, and he will improve for sure because I know the guy, I know his passion, his attitude, and I have no doubt." So he's doing the right thing. He's like saying he can improve here, he's keeping his feet in the ground, but clearly a fan of his.
2004.
I know, it's kind of scary, isn't it? Jesus. 2004. It's the year Man United signed Cristiano Ronaldo the previous year, just to put things into context. Like 2004.
I feel like anyone born after 2000 is just
Not a real person.
no.
Yeah. Shouldn't be in discos anyway, for sure. That's terrifying.
It is interesting though that De Zerbi says that, because that's when like Evan Ferguson went on his run at scoring a while ago, and we had Jasmine Baba on, and I know she said it at the time. She compared him to the likes of Haaland and Mbappe, and she kind of broke down like what the differences were with Ferguson, and she said the exact same things in terms of him being a much more all-round scorer than a lot of those players. You know, he's not just a poacher, he actually does quite a lot off the ball, so it was interesting that De Zerbi sees that as well and is actually saying it.
Jared O'Connell in the comments says, "Ooh, Evan is a place on earth." That's, I mean, this is a.
See you all on the Aviva singing that?
Well, this is like, we need something, because there's only one Keano was like Roy Keane, and then obviously some people did it for Robbie, and then the Keano chant worked for both of them. But I'd say Robbie always felt a little bit like, well, can I not get my own chant here? I mean, like, I'm literally the greatest goal scorer this country is ever going to produce. Can you not just like make something up for me? So that is the challenge. What is our
We don't really do chants, do we, in international?
Evan Ferguson chant? Well, fan culture is definitely growing, and
It is.
Rapidly. So
We gotta have more chants. Like the United fans have "We all love Alex Ferguson" chant. We could adopt it. It could work. I don't know if they throw the knighthood in front of it, maybe, and that's why it works rhythmically. They probably throw Sir Alex Ferguson in there.
What?
We can just take it for Evan Ferguson.
Yellow Submarine.
Oh, I don't know what the chant, the tune is. Maybe someone in the comments can let us know. But maybe we do have to have a chant for some of our players. We don't do it enough.
I've heard the Seamus Coleman, 60 grand a couple of times. That's the Everton one.
Oh, is that? I've never heard that one.
Sorry.
Or for Ireland as well, for the women.
I got the order that all wrong. It's Wolves Coventry Inter as opposed to Wolves Inter Coventry. He comes back from Inter to Leeds.
Still not a bad start to a career.
Yeah.
Oh,
How long did he have in the Premier League before he went to Inter? Now I'm just gonna do a quick here.
Maybe we should have a competition for the chants.
Yeah, get an Evan Ferguson chant going.
Yeah, get a couple people on air, do like a little competition, get the YouTube comments to decide what's the best ones.
Yeah.
If anyone has them, send them in to us on Twitter, or else you can.
Because football fans are very, very unique. They come up with I actually think clubs now meet up. I'm sure it's the same with Arsenal as Man United and Liverpool. League of Ireland clubs, I'm sure, do it as well, where they meet up and genuinely come up with chants at meetings. Bring a few to it and decide, that works, that doesn't.
So it's been an interesting one, because like in women's football there's less of a culture of it a little bit, but they've tried to create a bit more, and this is literally what fans do. Like, they meet up week to week and they get like little kids involved and they get them to make up their own chants. Like, I remember there was one for a little girl made up one for Beth Mead during the Euros, and she went all the way to Wembley with it. So
yes, you need that. But like, as soon as a player starts doing well, because Marcus Rashford didn't have one, and then United fans were like, okay, we got to get on this. So now they have one for him.
He'd one season at Coventry in the Premier League, Robbie Keane, when he was 19 turning 20.
Evan's ahead of him.
Yeah, now Robbie had 3 seasons before that in the Championship, and was banging in the goals at a ratio of 1 every 3 games. But he's, you would say these are similar in terms of the time of arrival. So look, we are getting carried away. Of course we are, because you're supposed to get excited about this. I keep telling everybody who listen, this is the whole point about loving sport, because a lot of your other teams are going to let you down. There's going to be difficulties.
And people give out about the fact that we compare the likes of Evan Ferguson to other players. Like, why are you comparing him to Robbie? Why are you comparing him to Henry or whoever? You kind of have to. There has to be a barometer there. We have to decide how far ahead or behind schedule he is. We're not saying he's going to necessarily reach those levels, but we hope he does.
Let's compare him to Troy Parrott and to Obafemi and to everybody else who has come through in that kind of group where we're like, or Adamida. We're, they've all got a taste of, Parrott hasn't, of Premier League experience properly, and have not been at this level. So he's way ahead of all of those, and that's why I think you're building a team around him, because again, maybe you don't announce to the public that you're building the team around him, and you don't tell him you're building the team around him. But if you're Stephen Kenny over the next while, you're like, if we can just get him to do this for us, then we're going to be in every game.
I think Stephen Kenny should adopt the 2013 Clare hurling All Ireland tactic of whispering to Shane O'Donoghue the morning of the match, "Oh, by the way, you're in," and then he scores a hat trick. Do that just the morning of the France game, or maybe an hour or two before kick-off, and just be like, "Evan, by the way, you're starting against France."
Who's the Tony Kelly in this, though? Who's the one who's like the hurler of the year? Will Smallbone didn't start the game last night for Stoke, by the way. Come off the bench. Stoke made a lot of changes. 8 changes from the weekend for the game against Millwall. And obviously, they're in a relegation battle. They're not. I mean, they're kind of safe. But you think that maybe you put the full team out for.
Yeah.
It's like it's Brighton.
Would have thought so, lads. It's Brighton. And Brighton, surprisingly, and I only realised it last night, have never won a major trophy. So, like, Brighton now into a last 8 of the FA Cup with Evan Ferguson leading the line. I know City are still left in the competition, but
so 2 more games to get to Wembley for the semis.
That's it, like.
Yeah.
And win the next game and you're into the semis. So
sorry, it's quarterfinals next.
Quarterfinals next, yeah.
Next.
That was 5th round last night. So
we will accept him not getting a hat-trick against France. That's acceptable, says Jim Sullivan. I know, it was obviously pressure makes diamonds, says Chucky and Alba. I think the only tickets left are the 175 quid ones. Super Ken 354 says, okay, I hadn't checked that since, but I thought there was bundles that you get for the 2 games.
Sorry, Shane O'Donnell. Who did I say? Someone commented Shane O'Donnell. I don't know who I said.
Shane O'Donoghue.
Shane O'Donnell, of course, was scored that.
Golf commentator.
Yeah.
Adrian McGrath says, people who say Precious retires never did anything important in their lives. Is Precious retires not like a Ruby Walsh thing? Ruby had a decent career. You would say that maybe like one of the all-time great careers in his sport. I'd say he did some stuff.
He was decent, yeah.
Seriously, chill out, says NTV, who is the constant wet blanket of our comments. You're laying too much pressure on the lad. Let him grow and flourish. This is how you make superstars. In Norway, they never pressurised Haaland. Did they not?
I'm sure they did.
I don't think that's true.
Have we not all heard about Erling Haaland since he was
knee-high,
filmed in the background kicking the ball at
behind his father? Yeah, for sure. 100%. There's pressure putting all young players that start scoring goals.
Well, it's kind of like you were saying as well, though, like if he comes out, if like we do build a team around Ferguson, or say like he does start against France and he doesn't have a great game, I don't think anyone's actually going to turn around and be like, oh, well, that's him written off. We might as well just give up on the hope now. Like, he's still performing well. We can't expect him to necessarily come into the Ireland squad and pull off a miraculous performance and, I don't know, somehow score and let us win against France. Like, I don't think anyone is expecting that.
I'm excited, guys. I'm very, very excited.
We should start picking the team for this. We're going to pick the team for the World Cup a little bit later on. Are you prepared, Kathleen, for the... Like, you're going to have to go and interview some of these people who you're dropping from your squad.
Yeah, I was kind of half thinking that 1 or 2 players did mention it to me last week when I was in Marbella, that they had actually watched the Power Rankings and seen it back, and I got a few texts about it afterwards. So I'm slightly concerned, but it's all in good faith. It's all in good faith.
Just trying to choose my words properly. The veterans of the Irish football press pack lament the time when they used to be able to go on the piss with the Ireland footballers back in the Jack Charlton era, and they got to know them really well, and there was very few of them, and they were mates. And so you're in that sweet spot now where everything is great because we've just qualified for the World Cup, but very soon you're going to have to like drop some of them from your World Cup squad, Kathleen, and that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, well, like we were even talking about it the last time we kind of ranked the squad, and we talked about it on Koi Gig as well, and say Karen Duggan and Emma Byrne are both very strong on the fact that they're not all that approving of the fact that there are a couple of girls being brought into the squad now on Irish passports who haven't played there before, and said that their Vera Pauw might have a bit of a... not a revolution on our hands, but like there might be a couple of people who are upset within the squad who actually go to the World Cup, even not talking about the ones who aren't picked. The fact that she's brought in these players and the veterans are being left at home. But I think there's a very real chance of that happening at the moment. Like, we'll talk about it a bit more later, but I think it's the sort of thing that you have to just remove all emotion from, and if we want to get any sort of results.
You got to pick the best players available.
Well... you know,
You do, 100%. It's a World Cup.
yeah, but also there's like a bit where how much of the dilettante are you like? So
Did you guys read Dennis Walsh's piece yesterday in the Irish Times? He basically was having this exact argument and comparing it to like Irish teams of old and how certain managers approached it, and the managers that dropped the veteran players and regretted it in later years are the ones who stuck with them and went, yeah, no, this is my plan. And I think what I got from the piece in general was just like, you commit to your choices, and maybe you make a mistake down the line, but you make the mistake early. You don't leave it to like the day before you're going to a tournament or something to pull someone out of a squad.
I think it depends, right? If you're dropping players who are at the fringe, who aren't going to get any game time, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're bringing in, so McAteer had an impact, and he hadn't been part of the squad. Phil Babb had an impact, and he hadn't been part of the qualifying squad in '94. And obviously Gary Kelly is a completely different scenario than the two lads who had to go and find passports and discover their eligibility. And that's kind of the situation that we're talking about here. I don't think if she was to parachute in somebody who was playing in the WSL, or if Sarah Rowe, for example, was to parachute in, I think that's a bit different from us finding Americans who are Irish qualified. If they're going straight in the team, then I think it's more acceptable. But if they're coming in to take a place on the bench for players who have been through the campaign and through the previous campaign, that is going to cause unrest, and that unrest may not be worth it. You're saying you've got to pick the best players, but if it's like the difference between the 18th and the 21st best player, or the 18th and the 24th best player, like, that doesn't matter.
But does it not?
I don't know if I agree with that though, because like the thing we've always said about this Irish squad is that we lack depth and we lack that consistency in that and that's something that Vera Pauw has actually been very good at like bringing in players, whether it's people from the championship, and I'm not necessarily talking about the players who have just come in the most recent camp. I'm talking about like players that she's brought in from the championship who've already been on the outskirts, and actually like a Lily Agg. She wasn't all that important to the squad a couple of months ago, but now she's like pushing for that starting spot with someone like Rusha Littlejohn, who has been consistent in the team. And I think if you're bringing in a player who's either in the starting squad or pushing for that place, or is the sort of person that you bring on like 60 minutes when you just need a fresh pair of legs, I understand that there is that unrest in the squad that you need to... Is that
not like, so they're on the verge of the first team if they're getting minutes? I guess in a World Cup squad there's going to be 3 games, right? And we'll probably use 16, maybe 18 players. So there's 5 who are just along, whether we like it or not. They're literally just it's also
tackling
and
players as well. Like 2 of those are going to be goalies.
Yeah, like, is it really worth upsetting the squad dynamic for somebody who? Like, by all means, get them into the squad now, get them committed to you, and then over the next 2 years integrate them into the team if they're going to make it. But is the Ag situation not exactly somebody who is making a difference in the first team, and so therefore everybody accepts that? Say Ag wasn't good enough, but was like okay, and was the 19th best player, but was taking the place of somebody who'd been in the squad for the last couple of years, as opposed to somebody who's pushing for the team. I guess that's the level where you really need to be careful about what the team dynamic is, because like, whether we like it or not, the national identity seems to be an important thing for this group. They were singing "Ua Up the Ra" in the change rooms after qualifying. Like,
were they? I didn't hear about that.
You know, there's a delicate ecosystem here where you're like, okay, I need to be careful here.
Squad dynamic is in the same frame of mind as momentum. I mean, it exists in the sense that kind of exists. Do you know, it's a thing that. Well, you see, going into the 2002 World Cup, Ireland had a great squad dynamic. It was brilliant. But all it takes is one chink in the armour and then it all dissipates. Like, the squad dynamic will be built around whatever squad is picked. Like, the best 3 players will go to the World Cup. And that will be the squad dynamic forevermore. I think they'll get used to it. And whoever's number 24, 25, 26, they will be desperately unlucky, and they will never live it down for the rest of their lives, I'd imagine. But that's football. That's tough luck. That's life. You don't always get what you want. So I think Vera Pauw just picks the best 23 players, goes to the World Cup, and then at least we can turn around and say, oh, we gave it our all. We picked the best team. We picked the best squad. leave no stone unturned. I think that's the attitude she's taken.
I agree with the leave no stone unturned. I'm just saying that it's not a automatic slam dunk that you're guaranteed. So anyway, I wish you the very best, Kathleen.
Thank you.
No pressure, by the way. Yeah.
I think we've set that up nicely for it to have this exact same argument in about like an hour's time.
Yeah. So pressure on Kathleen and Evan Ferguson this morning.
Keir Hudson's picked her team: Bazunu, Coleman, Collins, Egan, O'Shea, Doherty, Cullen, Malumbi, Obafemi, Ferguson, Ogbene. Whoa, this is pretty attacking. Where's your third midfielder there? So we're going with the front three of Ogbene, Ferguson, and Obafemi, with Malumbi and Cullen. So it's a 5-2-3. Wow. I mean, you know what?
It's a sort of attacking mindedness we've been asking for a long time. So
you're going out, you're dying on your shield there, Ciara.
We're never going to go for that, though, are we? You can't play all three of Ogbene, Obafemi and Ferguson.
I mean, I'd love to see it in a friendly.
100% in a friendly, yeah. Do it against Latvia a few days before if you want. Try it out. But maybe not for the French game. The last, I just don't know.
Well, if we're already admitting we're going to lose it.
Well, like, the other thing is that you can push Collins and or O'Shea into midfield whenever we have the ball and whenever we don't have the ball. So it's not necessarily a flat, if you're being really smart about it. And also, like, Doherty has played that wing back role, does understand what it means to step in and create extra bodies. I mean, I'd certainly be very excited about it. And maybe the thing to do against France is to attack the shit out of them. Like, wasn't there a lot of praise for Scaloni in the way that he took on that game? Certainly in the first half, and that actually it required a change from Deschamps in the second half to get France back into the game. And like, maybe if you're operating at that level, obviously they've got a very significantly higher calibre of player. But, you know, we've got our own Leo Messi now, right?
How many players has he been compared to this morning? I can't get Belinda Carlisle out of my head, by the way. Evan is a place on earth. If anyone comes up with any better chance, please let us know.
All right, it's 7:57 this morning. You're watching OTB AM. We're very glad that you're with us. If you want to get in touch, you can get us on YouTube, youtube.com/offtheball. You can also, of course, WhatsApp us 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Keith Wood's going to join us in 20 minutes. We've got John Duggan with us at 8:45. Jonathan Wilson's up next, by the way, if you want to talk football. We've got the power rankings for the women's national team at 8:55. Phil Healy's going to join us at 9:15 ahead of the European Indoor Athletics Championships, and we'll play some Graham Hunter goodness out on the show at 9:30 this morning. But at 7:57 we are going to take a quick break, and we're back with Jonathan Wilson. Oh no, actually we're going straight to Jonathan. Jonathan, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Look, we're losing the run of ourselves because Evan Ferguson scored again last night, and my argument is that in football you should lose the run of yourself. That's the whole point. If you're going to be involved in supporting a team, you should support them, and when things are going well, you should get really into it.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, and he's obviously a phenomenal talent and somebody who's well worth getting excited about.
Can you give us like an honest broker opinion? Because like, we are literally carried away. We cannot see the wood for the trees here. Like, we've literally compared him to every one of the world's best strikers in the last 25 minutes in the show. So how good is he?
I mean, he's potentially very, very good. He's very young, so you've got to be careful about that. But he seems very level-headed. He seems to have that appetite to develop his game, which I think is the real key thing at this age. That he's not sort of thinking, right, I've cracked it. That there does seem to be that desire to continue his education, to continue to improve. There's not many players, I think, who've come into the game so quickly and so quickly seem so comfortable, so adept at so many facets of it, and I think it's indicative of just how gifted he is, that when he was on the receiving end of that terrible tackle from it was from Fabinho, wasn't it? It was in the Liverpool game. I sort of thought, even though I've got I don't particularly care about him or Ireland or Brighton, there was a sense of disappointment. I'm not going to be able to watch him for the next few weeks. So I really hope he gets over that soon. So, I think physically he's very, very good. Technically he's very, very good. And perhaps most importantly, mentally and temperamentally, he seems very, very good. Yeah,
the last point on this before we get on to what we actually got you on to talk about, the bit where he is so young and has come through so quickly, like, it's shocking, really. It seems like a complete outlier in how the Premier League does its business now, because they're scouting all of the world's best young players, and they generally don't come through until 20, 21, 22, and even then they tend to come through in another league before they get the opportunity in the Premier League.
Yeah, and I think that's I touched on a much wider point about youth development and the slight issue the Premier League has, that really the Premier League needs teams like Brighton, Brentford, Fulham to be, at least one or two of that sort of stature of club to be doing well, because that allows these young players to be thrust into it. Whereas if he was at Liverpool or a Chelsea or Manchester United, maybe that way would be blocked and he'd have to go out on loan and he wouldn't be getting his chance in a team playing well. And I think that's the key point. He could be thrust in playing for Watford or Norwich or whatever, but if you're in a team playing poorly, you're feeding on scraps. I mean, you could draw a comparison, it's not quite exact, but with Ellis Sims, who was on loan at Sunderland earlier this season, first half of the season, got 7 goals in 17 games, particularly when he was playing in front of Ross Stewart, looked incredibly bright. Then he's gone to Everton. Everton recalled him from the loan, and he's struggled for opportunities. And when he has got his chance, he's been wandering around up front while they whack long balls at him. And physically, he looks like that type of player. But he played best alongside a big man at Sunderland, alongside Ross Stewart. And I think there's more to his game than that. But he's not able to express that at Everton because they're never going to play with 2 forwards. So, the sort of mid-ranking teams slightly overperforming gives an opportunity for players to be fast-tracked that they wouldn't get at the bigger clubs, where there's probably 7 or 8 players vying for that position with him of a similar age.
Which brings us nicely to the situation at Chelsea, where they have acquired some of the best young talent in world football, a lot of it in the same position, and now they can't really find a blend that is functional at the moment. Are there significant problems with the way Chelsea are going about their ambition, or beyond the identity of the manager and the transfer policy, or is this all going to work itself out over the next 18 months? What's your instinct about what's going on there?
On the one hand, I'm so quite excited by a team trying something new, and this idea of we go out and we sign 6, 7, 8 players aged roughly 20, and we pay a lot of money for them and we give them long contracts, and this is the next decade of a club. I sort of see the appeal of that. However, at every stage I see doubts. I mean, the first one is, if this works, why has nobody done it before? But I guess that's the nature of evolutions. By definition, they haven't been done before. The second point is, football just doesn't really work like that. There's no sort of, in other businesses, you can buy an asset and you have a relative confidence that it will appreciate. I just don't think players, I don't think it's as straightforward as that form and injuries and fitness, the team they're in has such a bearing on what their value is, both in financially and in terms of what they deliver on the pitch, that I think it's very, very hard to predict where a player, however promising now, where he'll be in 3, 4, 5 years. I think giving players long contracts, while it gives you the security that the players, other clubs aren't going to come in and poach them from you because you can drive the value up. Well, realistically, who can afford to buy Chelsea's players? There's not many clubs there. And I think there's a massive danger that you get loaded with players who, for whatever reason, haven't quite developed as you'd hope. And then draining wages. And I know that the wages are relatively low and it's very heavily incentivized and it's really about bonuses. But if that's a liability for 7 or 8 years, that's the problem. Also, we've seen with a huge number of players that they almost need to be coming towards the end of their contract, to be entering a period of renegotiation, to be fully motivated. It's quite easy to go, 8 years, I can just sit here. I don't need to be playing for my future. But also, there's just a more fundamental problem that I guess splits into two. So one is, if you bring in, however many players they brought in, a dozen or so at once, it's really hard to get them to settle. And we've seen that when Fulham came up the last time, that no matter how good those players are, it takes some time to settle, and getting the blend right is really difficult. And secondly, you need a blend of ages in the squad, that you can't just shove out 8 players aged 21 or under. They need some experienced players there to help guide them. And so that's why the whole history of football, the best clubs yes, they bring in young players, but they bring them in 3 or 4. They'll push through, and then ideally they'll have 3 or 4 in their mid-20s and 3 or 4 touching 30 who've seen it all before, and then the one learns from the other, and the sort of, you get the blend of the energy and the enthusiasm of youth and the benefit of the experience of the older players. So I think it's a chaotic situation anyway. And then thrust into that, you've got Graham Potter, who I think is a very, very good manager. He's shown incredible, I think, emotional intelligence right the way through from the 9th tier of English football, the Ghana women's team, an amateur side essentially in Sweden, with Swansea, with Brighton. Every stage he's adapted and he's changed his approach, and it's worked. And there's no reason to think that Brighton is his ceiling. But he's a manager who is always, when you're coming from Brighton to a Big 6 or Big 7 side, there'll always be that slight question mark. And obviously the start he's had, those doubts are magnified. And I think fans have significantly lost faith. And from what we hear, players still do believe in him and do still appreciate him, and his calmness seems to make him very popular. But you do wonder how long that'll endure if form continues to be as poor as it is. And he could easily find himself drummed out before he's really had a chance to get his feet under the table in a very, very difficult situation.
It's ironic, Jonathan, that we're talking about Evan Ferguson when his former manager Graham Potter needs a striker right now. They've got one goal in 6 games, I think. It is. So will he be given? Are you led to believe he'll be given a bit of a leash to pre-season until Christopher Nkunku comes in, or is his job actually under threat in the next number of weeks?
I think that's very difficult to say. And everything we hear from the club is, no, we've got patience. We don't need to qualify for Europe this season. All of that is priced in. We're not worried about it. Everything you hear coming out the dressing room, in Chelsea's historically has been a very leaky dressing room, and a dressing room that has turned on previous managers. I haven't seen any evidence of that yet. You hear certain things from players that they appreciate that when they've come back from injury, Potter's been very patient about putting them back in the side, whereas previous managers maybe would have rushed them back and risked further injury. He's been very much, let's get this right. Let's make sure that you're not going to break down again. And I think N'Golo Kante's eagerness to sign a new contract, having been skeptical about that, I think that's evidence of how he feels comfortable with Potter. But they've only scored, was it 4 goals this calendar year? Won 2 of the last 17 games. Eventually those doubts are going to set in, and I think the worry for me as somebody who broadly thinks Potter's quite a good thing and is quite a good manager and may well do well at a big club in the future, is his team selections now. They and maybe this is inevitable when you've got a squad as big as the one he's got, but there doesn't seem much consistency there. I'm struggling to see what he's building towards. It does slightly feel as if he's just sort of grabbing at options and hoping something sticks. And then, it may be that he does have a long-term plan and we just don't see it. But at the moment, I'd be slightly concerned about how many changes he's making, how consistently. But he's starting to look like a manager who doesn't quite know what he's doing.
Is there an attacking structure to the Potter body of work that is identifiable at the moment?
I think he's always been a manager who, a little bit like Guardiola, likes control. And obviously at smaller clubs, that's had to be tempered. There's only so much control a Brighton or a Swansea are going to have. I think there is that big concern that his failing at Brighton was they didn't score enough goals, that they underperformed their XG quite significantly. And then I guess you're left with the question of, is he just and that's obviously what's happening at Chelsea, that I think of the 10 games since the World Cup, they've had the better XG in 7 of them now. So they've picked up league games. I'm talking about, they've picked up 10 points in most league games. The XG would suggest they should have 20, and if they had 10 more points, then they'd absolutely be in the race for top 4. And we probably wouldn't be expressing these doubts. But is he just unlucky that at Brighton and at Chelsea he's had a team without a goal-scoring centre forward, or is there something deeper about the way he plays, that his teams create chances that for some reason get you a good XG score but don't actually produce goals. My suspicion is the former, but it's not unreasonable, I think, to wonder if it might be the latter. And that's why you hope he does get a chance with Nkunku, with a proven goal scorer. But it may be that the damage by then is done. If you've had 6 months of not winning games, then it's understandable that if players lose a bit of faith in you and start sort of disobeying the game plan, start doing their own thing, thinking that they know better than the manager. And once that starts to happen, then you've got big problems.
It's funny, I was reading an article in one of the Irish papers, the Irish Independent, from Colm Keys this morning, talking about the Derry GAA squad in Gaelic football, how it's on purpose very, very lean this year, and how that's leading to success on the pitch. Graham Potter has the opposite problem, Jonathan. I think it's a first team squad of 31 players. There's talk that it's impacting training as well, where he's having to adapt training to improvise and have smaller groups and keep everyone involved. Like, it's a matter of time before a squad that size leads to morale issues, surely.
Yeah, you think so. And it's, this is, again, if you're looking for excuses for Potter, there's plenty there. When he arrived, they had a dozen players out through injury, and he was down to the bare bones. And they've gone almost immediately from this sort of skeletal squad to this incredibly bloated squad, where in any given week he could put out another 2 teams as well as the one he does put out. And I think that confuses his thinking. But yeah, as you say, if players aren't regularly getting in the side, then they're going to be asking questions. Now, I guess the advantage of them being young is maybe those questions aren't quite as loud as if they were 26, 27. But still, if you're a player who's been playing regularly for, whether it be in Ukraine or the Netherlands, and you've moved for 30 odd million, 80 odd million, and you're not getting a regular game, you're going to be thinking, well, what have I actually done? Why have I come here? And of course, you've also then got added to that, there's essentially 3 different tranches of this squad. So there's the squad that was there before Bowley arrived. There's the sort of the £250 million of the player signed last summer under Tuchel, and all of them must be thinking, well, why have I come here? I came for Tuchel, and Tuchel explained it to me, and these were Tuchel's plans, and we know Tuchel was very involved in that process. And a week after that window closes, in comes a different manager, and now this manager's had 350 million quid spent as well. So there's 3 different sections, of a squad's been built up over 3 different periods, none of which seem to tally with any of the others. So, the problem is obviously not the depth of the squad. I'm just not convinced it's been put together particularly intelligently. And I think when you bring in that many players, it's as if they tried to take a shortcut to the process. It's like, I don't know, you start playing Championship Manager, you've got a massive budget, and you just go out and buy all the 20-year-olds because you think they'll all develop at once. But real life's just not that easy. The evolution of players is not automatic. They need to be brought through, and they need people to guide them, and they need that evolutionary process.
Football, obviously, and football fans is a constant world of comparison, and, well, how are they doing? And we know that we have the league table, which is the ultimate comparison, but there was also a trophy lift at the weekend where Manchester United have turned their season around under Eric Ten Hag, and I mean, it's obviously a very different CV that Ten Hag has to Potter, but by comparison, those players at Manchester United who were previously failing under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and managed before that now look like they are not just competent, but also in some cases much better players than they were previously. So that's what a good manager can do to a squad, irrespective of the size of it. It doesn't help Potter that Ten Hag is being quite so successful at the moment, does it?
No, it doesn't. I'm not sure the comparison. It's not an entirely direct comparison. That I think the United squad. With 3 or 4 players coming in the summer, it's made it look very different. And I think more importantly, 1 player leaving. But I think the speed with which Ten Hag's been able to sort that out is incredibly impressive. You think how bad they were in that defeat to Brentford. But that does show how quickly these things can turn. If Potter gets his centre forward in, if he does get them scoring goals, they scored fewer goals than any other professional team in England this year. That's not normal. That's not right. There's something that's I think beyond Potter. There's just a weirdness there. If that disappears, if he does find the right structure, it could be that in 6 months this all suddenly looks very good. That I think we've seen with Arsenal and Arteta, things can change very quickly. It only takes one or two things in the squad to be slightly different, and suddenly a lot of other players can look a lot better as well. Now, I think that's one of our failings as a football culture, that we're far too quick to judge players and say, oh yeah, he's not up to that level, or he should be getting in the England team, when actually it's to do with the structure that they're in. That there's very few players in the Premier League who are actually bad players. It's just, can you get the most out of them? I think Potter's struggling to do that at Chelsea at the minute, partly because of the size of the squad, and partly because the sort of general atmosphere of despair and frustration. So much money has been spent and so little's been delivered on the pitch.
And I know Graham Potter has a couple of top recruitment specialists apparently alongside him, but if you compare that recruitment at Chelsea and United, and even away from the pitch, you think of characters and personalities. I mean, you look at the likes of Casemiro or Varane or Martinez at Old Trafford. Like, Casemiro's won how many Champions Leagues, and yet the biggest celebration at the weekend was when he shepherded the ball out for a corner, and he's all of a sudden given it large to the United fans behind the goal. Like, clearly Ten Hag and United's recruitment has been based on players that have that attitude off the pitch, that they have something, a bit of personality, whereas maybe that's something that the Chelsea recruitment has been lacking. Is that maybe harsh, or is that fair?
I think it's inevitable danger when you sign so many young players. So, I mean, you look at Enzo Fernandez, for instance, you can't doubt his will to win. I think Casemiro is an exceptional signing, but they paid 60 million for a player, who's got 5 years left, maybe maximum, whereas Chelsea paid 105 million for a player who's maybe got 15 years left. So, but you're right. It is a danger if you bring in young players. You don't quite have that drive and that confidence. But I think you look at Fernandes and you think, he's a really, really good player. Is he worth 105 million? These are sums I really I struggle to understand. Is he an exceptional footballer? Yes. His capacity to find space, his touch, his passing, allied to that aggression. I think he's. You imagine him and Kante playing together in the back of midfield, and you think any opposing creator, that's a really terrifying force. And Fernandes can create as well, and Kante can make those driving runs. So I think there's plenty of potential there with Chelsea, but it's more the spending on those wide forwards where it's a little bit harder to see why they needed to do that when they already had wide forwards there, whether there were other positions they needed to strengthen first. But you look at Badiashile at Chelsea, who's, 19, 20? And when he's played, he's looked exceptional. So it's not that the whole recruitment has been a disaster. It's that bringing in so many players at once has created confusion. But certainly Fernandes and Badiashile, I think, and João Felix, albeit only on loan, have looked, I think, very, very promising and very impressive.
What is your explanation for why Ten Hag has been so good? What is it that he's done to make the team so effective that has allowed those players to either overachieve in some cases or fulfill their potential in others?
I think he's a proper manager. He's tough. He's got a clear vision of what he wants to do. He's smart enough and intelligent enough and brave enough to adapt that when it obviously wasn't working. He tried to play that Ajax style, the high line, playing out from the back. Then he looked at De Gea and thought, all right, that's not De Gea's strength. We'll slightly modify that. He's clearly had an influence over recruitment, that he knew Martinez's abilities and brought him in. I don't know how much say he had over Casemiro, but Casemiro has been huge in terms of filling that hole in the middle of midfield and projecting his authority. The work he's done with Rashford, whether that's to do with the finishing work he's been doing with Benny McCarthy, whether it's just been to refocusing and getting him fit after all the injury problems he's had. I think all of that's incredibly impressive. But I think it's just his toughness, his willingness to impose discipline. And I think, yes, he's got a better CV than Potter's not entirely fair. He's worked at a higher level than Potter, but there's plenty of players and managers who've come from the Netherlands who have struggled in the Premier League. It's not that he had enormous European success. He had got to a semi-final, but it's not he'd won European competitions. But to have that steeliness, to impose his vision after that Brentford game, to say, look, you ran, 13 kilometres less than Brentford, we're doing a 13k run tomorrow, and he then goes out and does it with them. To manage to ease Ronaldo out of the club in a way, I mean, Ronaldo I think helped with this, but by the time Ronaldo left, it looked like an inevitable decision. There was no way you could keep him there. So politically, he won that battle. And that's a big thing to do, to take on Ronaldo and get him out. And I think he was a massive problem in terms of just drawing all the attention, stories you heard about his disruptiveness in training, his reluctance to fulfill certain tactical instructions. Getting rid of Ronaldo allowed them to return to a tactical basis. And that's why you feel a bit sorry for Solskjaer. That I don't think Solskjaer is anywhere near as good a manager as Ten Hag. But his United at least were able to play on the break, and they got good results against big teams by sitting deep and using that pace in forward areas. He gets Ronaldo imposed upon him. They just can't do that. So the one thing that they did well is suddenly taken away from them. But Ten Hag has been able to follow his vision, and he's clearly a very, very good manager, and he's been allowed to manage. So, the discipline, the fact that Rashford playing so well is then late for a meeting and he gets dropped, and that's a message to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're scoring 15 goals in 15 games. You turn up when I tell you to turn up, or you're out. And that, I think, it seems a basic thing, but discipline, getting the players to buy in fully. That's hugely important, and you saw that buy-in with Casemiro celebrating, shepherding the ball out. He's given them an intelligence and a nastiness. They protected that lead very, very cleverly against Newcastle on Sunday, against a team who've sort of become noted for their gamesmanship. So they've got a structure, but they've also got a will to win and a personality that's a bit tougher than United have been for a decade.
Jonathan, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
It's Jonathan Wilson there. Really interesting stuff as ever. You're watching OTB AM. Perhaps you're watching us on YouTube and you're subscribed there. Maybe you're listening to us on OTB Sports Radio. However you're with us, we're glad you're here. You can text us on 0879 180 180, or you can get us on Twitter @OffTheBallAM, or leave a comment in the YouTube stream. And we're live each morning with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. During the break, you're going to hear from the Football Pod lads talking about James Carr's goal versus Tyrone. Rivaldo-esque, from the depths of James O'Donoghue's memories of the 2002 World Cup. You're going to hear a description of the finishing, which is really interesting, and probably a prototype for forwards out there. If James O'Donoghue's giving you finishing advice, you should be listening to this. The Football Pod is in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the Football, Hurling and Camogie All-Ireland Club Championships. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more.
You're listening to OTB AM.
Off the ball.
He's a very, very dangerous player. In Scottish football, he's probably too good for Scottish football, if you know what I mean. He's a fantastic Postecoglou type player.
Thibaut Courtois, who was man of the match against who? Liverpool.
Yeah, well,
Liverpool in the Champions League.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Seamus Coleman is going to the Everton fans. Look what I did! I voted Thibaut, everybody. Look.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts, and download the OTB Sports app.
But I ended up getting a WhatsApp a little later with a question that somebody wanted to ask the pod. So I'll ask you who you think it is afterwards, Kevin Kilban.
Tommy, I want you to ask the lads about a technique in Gaelic football that I think I've mentioned it to you before in the past. James Carr's goal on Saturday, great goal it was, great pass from Aidan O'Shea, but look at his technique for finishing the goal. So many of the Gaelic players, when I watch them, they always look to get that clean strike, almost on the side foot, or get the clean strike, which obviously when you get a clean strike, the ball rises. James Carr struck the ball into the ground. So it actually doesn't look like a clean strike, but it was a deliberate strike, I felt, the way that he shot. And I think the keeper then, as he's coming out to make the save, with that clean strike, has more chance to make the save because it's obviously on the rise, the ball, whereas the way that Carr hit it into the ground, the keeper's actually no chance because it's bouncing under him. I just wondered if that was anything that the lads had thought about.
Is that
in terms of finishing when they get one-on-one with the goalkeeper? Don't know, I'm just interested in that.
Do you get what Kev is getting at here?
100%. I actually do. And I actually good friends with Brian Kelly, the former Kerry goalie. he said every save he makes is from like hip to shoulder. Yeah. People, when you're going through on goal and you hit it at that height, it's so easy for the keeper to make the save. Whereas if it's on the deck, it could be a scuttery one, but once it hits the deck, it's so hard to save.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Elite stuff from James Carr and Kevin Kilban and James Donoghue and Paddy Andrews and Tommy Rooney on the Football Pod. You get that wherever you get your football, whether you get the GA stream or the Football Pod in its own stream on podcasts. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're going to say good morning to Keith Wood. Keith, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. How are you getting on?
Yeah, good. Before we get into the rugby, we should talk about a couple of notable passings that have happened in the last week. The rugby community was completely shocked by Tom Tierney's passing, and then a legend of Munster and Ireland passed away in the last 24 hours as well.
Yeah, Brian O'Brien. I mean, we seem to be having too many of these conversations, to be honest. For Tom first, I mean, Tom was a total shock. 46 years of age is far too young, and he had an unbelievable impact actually in Munster. I mean, I played with him for a few years with Ireland and with Munster, and he was pure crack, a scamp. I mean, absolute crack all the time. And of course, he played with Gary Owen for a lot of years as well. But it was his impact on a lot of the young kids, and I know it from my own two youngest, as an Irish coach and Munster coach in the development of the young players, and a lot of them came out in force yesterday, and will again, I think, tomorrow at the funeral. But the impact he had on the young fellas, he had a joy of the game. He lived the game. They've all been heartbroken, actually, as have we. And, you kind of get used to it when you're a bit older and can deal with it. But when you see the anguish on young men's faces when someone that had influenced them so much passes away. So it's a huge loss for Mary and his two daughters. And it's, very sad. Brian is different. Brian is older. I'm smiling because I just think of so many parts of his history of where they intersect with my own. He was an unbelievable, proud Shannon man, crazy Shannon man, and became a crazy Munster man, became a line selector, Irish selector, president of Shannon Rugby Club, manager of Munster, manager of Ireland. And I was in the change room the day he decided to sing Stand Up and Fight for the first time. I could be getting it wrong, but I think it was after a Saracens game but I can't remember for certain. And I mean, for him to belt out a song like that and hold the whole team, and it became part of legend. And look, I just think he was a huge servant to the game, but also he was a huge presence. He was fantastic with Ireland as manager. Worked incredibly well with Eddie O'Sullivan. Was fantastic with Eddie O'Sullivan back in the day. But yeah, very important man I will admit, very important man for rugby. Very important man to us too. He was a cracking friend.
Yeah, beloved of everybody in that Irish setup, and all the generations who got to work with him, I think, are actually echoing your sentiments this morning. So we'd send our condolences to the O'Brien family as well. Let's look back briefly on the Italy game before we look forward to the Scotland game. It's one of those where Italy are getting loads of credit for how well they played, and rightly so, and the Ireland team is heavily depleted. So in terms of the lessons that you draw that are like deep-seated and that you're still thinking about in 3-6 months' time, beyond the squad depth, and now as the dust settles, is there much for Ireland that they're going to be like, okay, this is fundamental to how we do our business in the future? Or is it more like we're understanding more about everything here? This is just a layering on of extra information that we have.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you said a lot in that question. I look back on the game and think we were shorn of a lot of players. I think Italy have improved an awful lot, and in times that I've been so downhearted, disheartened by Italy's performance in the last few years, that they might have a couple of good players would come in and they try and play with a bit of additional width and flair, but they succumb to their discipline problems and maybe lack of fitness. This year they look entirely different, and yet they're not getting the wins. So that's very tough for them. That wins in the autumn, but not in the Six Nations. So I think they're on an upward trajectory, and I think they're incredibly dangerous. And that's one of the big parts for them. They've become incredibly dangerous. We were shorn of a lot of players. I've said often, I just think our structure is a really good fallback. So I looked at it and I think the performance was good. It could have been very good. The try just before half time kind of changed things a little bit. It took us a long while to fight for it, for the victory. I think there was a risk. And I thought we came out the other end of it. So I don't think I'd be entirely happy with the performance, but I would have said that the performance was good enough just about to get the win away from home against a team that was fresh and filled with some level of consistency and composure, with the exception of the 4-on-2 overlap that Brax kicked into the corner. That could have changed things an awful lot. But I thought a lot of players stood up, played pretty well. But it just also shows you that there's the differences in the quality of some of our players when they're not there has a drop of a few percent. That few percent can mean passes don't go to hand where they're supposed to. It can mean everything is off ever so slightly. But I think the game is invaluable for Ireland. I think they would have learned a huge number of lessons and won. Yeah. And there's times we learned lessons when we lost, and that ruined half the season.
This is a better situation, for sure. It's definitely a better situation, and those lessons will definitely be absorbed. James Ryan did a half-an-hour interview with Joe Malloy, and again, you can get that in our podcast feed. And in the middle of it, they were talking about the decision not to kick the points. And Ryan makes the point, you're talking about outcome, we think about process. And when the review is had, we'll ask, was the process right in our decision making to kick for the corner? He made the point that the first one wasn't a gimme kick for Ross Byrne, and Henderson, whose job it was to call the line out, was confident they were going to win the line out, and eventually they do kick the points anyway. So this is from a really nice philosophical position where we get to debate whether or not it was the right thing or the wrong thing. And I was asking the question on the show yesterday, does your process have to allow for the information to change in the moment? And I guess specifically I'm asking, is the process always, look, our decision is that we are going to win games by scoring more tries than the opposition, and that's fine, it worked really well in New Zealand, and that's kind of the bit where they stop ticking points and they just kick to the corner, because presumably the analytics says the more you kick to the corner, the more often we're going to score tries, and eventually we'll wear them down. But is there a moment in a championship like this, or in a World Cup qualifying pool, where those points and the victory are actually more important than the process of overwhelming the opposition with the scoring of the tries? And I just am interested in your perspective as a captain.
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily as binary as you put it out, as if you do one thing or the other, and there can be the risk. I would look at the process that's put in here is built on the confidence of a very large number of players. So the process requires people to be able to deliver on those parts that have to be delivered to make those decisions correct. And not everything sits in your hands. It isn't as if you can do everything you want without the opposition trying to stop you. So I think as confidence gets higher and higher and higher, I think that's where the idea of the process works. I can't fault that. can't fault that thinking, actually. I can't fault it when it's pushing us to levels that we haven't been before. I think at times it becomes kind of scary for fans, actually, to look at it and say, Jesus, no, just kick the ball over the bar. But in that moment, in that time, with the trust that the players have in each other for the delivery of the skill that's required to get the score that they're looking for, I think they're right. I think they're confident. I think it seems to be not an eradication of doubt, but an eradication of maybe poor technique a lot of the time. And so I think that depends on who's on the field at any moment in time. And if we were to try and read something into James Ryan's comments, it's that the team believe in the team and the squad, no matter who's on there. I think that's where your conversation comes in. Where it may be actually you're better off to kick the points at certain times, but you'll know that on the field and you'll gauge it with the there's that spark of confidence that's on the field that may not be visible from off the field. And when that is there, you'll say, yeah, definitely we'll kick in the corner because we're all up for this. We're all in the right mental space to be able to make this happen. Everybody knows their job. So look, I like it. I'm kind of enthralled at the moment with watching Stokes and McCullum and Bazball in cricket, that they've totally changed the manner in which they go about it. And they took a risk at the weekend or over the last few days and lost by 1 run in one of the great games of cricket. But they could have comfortably made it a draw very, very easily. But they went all out to do it. And in that instance, I think they learn an awful lot about themselves, and whether they do things differently or not, I don't know. So, but I like that. I like the fearlessness that seems to be in this team. And I'd hope that would continue because, like we talk about our history in times past of not getting past our quarter final, and to be interesting to do a sort of psychological review on all of those. And was there too much of a fear of failure in the midst of that? Well, this is a team that seems to be comfortable with winning, and that's a very different landscape for us.
Yeah, you could probably do a thesis on Ireland's quarter-final performances, I think, at World Cups in years gone by. Keith, when you're on that, you're talking even the cricket as well and tight games. Andy Farrell will have been quite pleased that it was maybe a tight win, leads to certainly no complacency going forward. Were there any negatives in particular that you might have picked out from the performance last weekend? Bundy Aki comes to mind as someone who was quite upfront and honest about his own performance after the game, maybe referencing a lack of game time, maybe showing up in defence a little bit. Was there anything that you touched on, Bundy's performance in particular, that maybe left a little bit to be desired?
Yeah, I would look at, it's funny, I'm trying to get my head around this entirely as a team performance. And when you highlight Bundy in that instance, he's not. I don't think he's a natural defender at 13, and I think 13 is an incredibly difficult place to play and defend. And I think at times we overlook the quality of Gary Ringrose over the last number of years. That we never really talk about our defence in that place for the most part because it seems to be sealed off comfortably. And so I also think you have a player playing out of position. I think Bundy's more 12, and I know it's only a subtle move out, but it's defensively you're far more exposed. That doubt makes it very difficult for him. It's great to hear him kind of say that he didn't get to the point of where he wanted to be. But we need to find our second 13, and for the most part we know that Henshaw can play there, but we've had a huge number of injuries in that space, so that puts us under pressure. That's where we're looking for if we look at other players, I thought Ross Byrne played pretty well. He still isn't a threat like Johnny is, and he is, for Johnny's picking the right decision at every moment. But I thought he grew into the game. It was his first Six Nations start. You could be quite churlish criticising guys who are trying to reach a height. And so I'd be looking at trying to get those players as further up that tree that they possibly can. But we will end up with players that are absolutely brilliant, and the guys in 2 and 3 behind them may not be as good. and we have to deal with that accordingly. So for me, I'd be happy with the win. But I think we've fallen off too many tackles. But I think that's also part of how Ireland are trying to play. They're playing wider, looser, with a huge amount of pace, and that will always end up with different gaps in the system. And then when the ball is turned over, your players are not in the ideal position to make the tackle or to defend properly. So I think you have to be careful for looking for perfection when you've 7 or 8 changes to a team.
And I guess the other thing is that you've also got to be careful looking for perfection, because it doesn't really exist. I mean, when the best New Zealand team with Carter and McCaw won the World Cup in London that time, beating Australia in the final, there were times along the way where even that team, which was clearly the best team in that World Cup, and there's an argument for them being the greatest of all the teams that that New Zealand have produced, they didn't have it all their own way, because this is big time professional sport where there is endless amounts of analysis being done on even the best players' weaknesses. And so, like, if we are going to go and do well in a World Cup, there's going to be a lot of tricky, dark moments that we've got to get out of.
I think that's valid, and it's the difference between excellence and perfection. You want people to perform excellently, and different people have a different level of what that is. And when you look at what we've kind of managed so far, and I'd also like the fact that they go at one game at a time. They're not really thinking of anything else, really. And they're looking for that level of performance that is excellent, and that's what it has to be, because when you make a mistake, you have to forget about the mistake. I just think this mentality of a team is a bit different. It seems to say, oh, well, we've made a mistake. We're not going to be berated for it. We're not going to berate ourselves for it. Let's just go and do the next thing really well again. And I think that makes a huge difference. So look, it's funny. I was trying to do my view of what I thought of the Six Nations so far, and I thought there's the brilliance of the French players, of so many of the French players. There's a brilliance of those. There's a brilliance of Finn Russell in Scotland, and other players are rising as well with him. But for Ireland, a lot of it's the brilliance of the team and how people know their jobs, and the standard of performance just seems to be consistently incredibly high. So I thought we had a high level of play, and I thought it was a really good performance on the basis of 7 or 8 guys being gone.
Yeah. It used to be that we would have a knock-on every 10 or 15 minutes. That's what it felt like watching. And now, whenever anybody has a knock-on, you're like, how did that happen? Well, that never happens anymore.
Yeah, and my God, there's a scrum. I thought those days were gone. And it's
what is this thing? Yeah. Come here. The Scotland game, right? We had Tom English on yesterday, and Scotland are feeling themselves at the moment. They've finally got a load of their injury problems have passed. The out half has a working, if not good, relationship with Gregor Townsend. Townsend has kind of let it be known that this might be the end of his time there, but he might be able to be convinced to stick around. It looked like Scott Robertson's going to get the New Zealand job, so maybe he won't be available to take the Scotland job. And with all of that kind of happening in the background, Scotland are in our group in the World Cup, so this game is massively important for all sorts of reasons, not least of which is actually we might get a home Grand Slam if we win it, or we'll certainly be playing for one anyway. So in terms of big occasions, Ireland at Murrayfield, sometimes it's a big occasion, but this time it's absolutely giant.
Yeah, I love watching some of the teams play. I love the pressure that's happening with some of them. You understand the carnage that's happening in different places, like with Wales and England sacking their coaches before Christmas. Like that just throws everything into confusion over there. Scotland have had a high level of consistency. They've got some really good performances for about 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, I watched Scotland with the BBC for a long time. I used to go to Edinburgh for nearly every one of their games. They lost nearly every one of them. They had a period of time where it was terrible. which we'd had about 10 years before that. So, but when you look at them now, I think they're unbelievably reliant on Finn Russell. I think he pulls the strings in a real kind of hero type way. It's all based in around him, and he has the ability to pass the most sublime passes, to drop the ball off to another player that you can't even see the pass happening, to kick pass better than pretty much anyone. His goal kicking is pretty fantastic. It's a huge game for us, but for me, I look at our team, and again, where our brilliance sits is around the structure. And if we get all our players back in and they're up to scratch, our job is to negate Finn Russell and see how Scotland are able to react with him being put under pressure. If we get our defensive line up well, there's a good chance that Finn will pass a scoring pass for them and for us.
Yeah.
Because he is always looking for, it's not always boom and bust. He's technically excellent, but he will go for it. And he knows he has to go for it. And actually for Scotland, he has to go for it. He can't play a conservative style. He can against certain teams, but I don't think he can against Ireland. So, but I think it's going to be a cracker. And I've looked at the, when you're enjoying the rugby at the moment, I'm not enjoying Wales and England. I'm not enjoying the manner in which they're playing. For me, it's a bit boring. There's a bit too much kicking. But when you look at Italy trying to go from everywhere, France having just so many unbelievable players, Ireland playing so well, Scotland playing well. They're great games. I mean, we've looked at some of the great games in Six Nations history. France, Scotland last week was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Briefly, Keith, just before we let you go, just wanted to touch on the news that came out this morning, last night on New Zealand, and what their situation in terms of a head coach is going to be. So they will have a new head coach essentially after this year's Rugby World Cup. Ian Foster will not be reapplying for the position. I guess Scott Robertson, the number one name in the frame. Jamie Joseph being mentioned as well as a potential replacement. What do you make of all this? And I guess the announcement this far ahead of the World Cup?
Well, there was rumours came out 2 or 3 weeks ago in terms of Ian Foster getting peeved with people talking about what's happening after the World Cup, and he's saying, Jesus, will you just concentrate on the World Cup and let's just not have any conversation about that afterwards. I think the announcement last night was a way of drawing a line in the sand so that this consistently doesn't go up and come up. I think he's under unbelievable pressure, as is New Zealand after the results of the last year. They've had, like for them, dreadful results. So, look, in terms of rugby, I never like these kind of chats that happen beforehand when a coach is kind of going to go or not go. They want to go under their own steam. He will now be going under his own steam. They'll be hoping it does stop all the conversation and doesn't destabilise the team further before the World Cup. But we are kind of happy enough listening to this, that while teams that we're playing against are kind of struggling somewhat, trying to get their house in order when our house seems to be pretty good. Don't get too excited by that because those things can fluctuate very quickly. Yeah. But look, for them, it's just trying to tidy up all the conversation so they're not talking about it for the next 9 months.
All right, Keith, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, gents.
It's Keith Wood giving us some thoughts this morning at 8:48. A reminder, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. John Duggan is with us.
Ger and Shane, how we doing?
How are you doing?
Yeah, good, not too bad.
Evan Ferguson, hype train. Choo choo.
Yeah. It's amazing when you see like Roy Keane and Dennis Irwin. If you remember the 1994 FA Cup final, it's on YouTube, I think, where they're all interviewed after the game. It's a routine double for United, and I actually think that was the first double they did under Ferguson. And these decorated players, and they're playing for so many years, and we've all this luxury of the Houghtons and the Stauntons and I'm using the Brian Cunns cliche now of the plural names, but Aldridge, all these players winning league championships, and now we're so parched, we're so starved in the desert that we're just trying to cling on to anything. And look, I hope Evan Ferguson scores more goals than Harry Kane in the Premier League. But look, just give the lad a break and hopefully he'll progress. He's only 18.
We were saying earlier we need a chant for him. I was making the point that we don't really have at international level chants and an atmosphere that maybe is there for club level at League of Ireland or Tottenham or United. Like someone has replied to me, Shane, just watching from earlier this morning, Shane talking about Ireland not really having chants.
Well, the Depeche Mode is the chant, isn't it?
Well, but you see, they have all these. He says, tell him to go sit in the South Stand 114 or go to away games. But it's all the same chants, the Aviva. It's stand up for the boys in green and
just can't get enough,
shoes off.
Isn't it?
But surely we need more. We need more. Evan Ferguson deserves one all by himself. I don't know what do you think of the atmosphere at the Aviva for home matches.
We've never been a country though for player. I suppose Paul McGrath.
Yeah, that's probably an exception.
Only one keynote, but I think that's probably after the World Cup. But it was always Que Sera Sera or Ole Ole Ole.
Even Que Sera Sera was like of its time in the late 80s. You know, maybe it only was birthed after in early 1990. I don't know. I think memory serves it was part of the campaign, but at least that was like new and creative.
I don't remember a Duffer chant or a Robbie Keane chant, or maybe we did the team of Gary Breens. I don't, but I never identified the Irish fans as good as we can be with player chants. Always more about the team. Come on, you boys in green.
Because I remember you talking about being at the Spurs game. Was it the away game you were at in Germany and the atmosphere on the train? Maybe it was a home game.
It was.
But like you need the chants add something to it.
Like there's so many chants about Antonio Conte and Pasta or whatever, or Richarlison and others. Like, and obviously all the sickening chants as well, which we can't repeat. Not that I engaged in them. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Like a football club, the wit of Premier League clubs and the wit of I'm sure Brighton have got one for him. Don't know what it is.
I'd like to think so.
You know, must go onto some Seagulls forums and see what the chant for Evan Ferguson is. Ooh, Evan, if you know what that's worth, or something like that. You know.
Yes, that's been in our heads the whole morning.
Yeah,
good blend of Carlisle impression there, John.
Well, you know, like me 80s. Sammy Schmodix as well scored.
Someone said in our comments he's Irish qualified.
Yeah, he's called up to the squad 2 years ago.
Right.
So you might be back in again. You got to think it's fizzling out for Brendan Rodgers. Even the interviews now seem a bit resigned.
Would not be happy enough that they're out of the cup. One focus, stay up.
Nah, the Leicester's probably best day in their history was winning that FA Cup a couple of years ago. So I just feel it's just fizzling.
Wigan though, did that time Wigan beat Man City in the cup final and they got relegated the same year? You need like.
I mean, but at least Wigan had that day, right?
They're not getting relegated though, but it just feels it's done now for Brendan Rodgers, and he probably wants a new challenge. Manor Solomon again scoring for Fulham. 4 goals in as many games, and then Leeds being eliminated, and then Phil Foden back in the loop for Man City, 3-0 win at Bristol City. Loads of games tonight. Luke Shaw and Fred may be rested for Man United against West Ham. Eric Ten Hag's back into disciplinary mode. Get back to work, folks. 7:45 start at Old Trafford. Spurs going to Sheffield United. Southampton against Grimsby. Burnley at home to Fleetwood. I think Spurs' name is on the cup this year, actually. And Arsenal can go 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League if they beat Everton at the Emirates. I'd expect them to do so.
Yeah, an underrated story today. I mean, a 5-point lead would be back. It would be recovery from the blip, essentially.
Well, they've already done that by winning 2 games away from home. Like they would beat Aston Villa and Leicester, and they were very comfortable against Leicester the weekend. As I just pointed out, the Leicester, they were not great. But yeah, I think our Arsenal win tonight, and you just don't know with Man City at the moment. They can either be cruising or they can be a little bit inconsistent. So they play Newcastle at the weekend, which is interesting, and Arsenal at Bournemouth.
We had Graham on last week. Graham Hunter. He was just talking about how in the City dressing room at the moment, there's just these little bits of stuff coming out where there had been a vice-like grip on the whole place, and everybody knew exactly what was going to happen, and it never seemed like there was anything happening that would upset the plan and the course of action of the team. There was just a mention of like, there's a sense of some favourites now. You're like, oh,
all right,
you know, like, and keeping a grip on a dressing room like that, where everybody is on their way to becoming like multi hundreds of millions, must have been difficult for a long time. And all this stuff is going on in the background of Pep, and he's got a little bit of attention on that. He's got a little bit of attention over here, and he's trying to get Haaland in the team. So there's a window There is a window.
There is a window for Arsenal to do a Leicester on this, and I'm not trying to compare the title wins because Leicester was a freak, but just the way Leicester that season just kept on getting ahead, and then they eventually won. Arsenal could do that. I think it's interesting. I think the signings have been good. Jorginho and Trossard. Obviously, he dropped Nketiah the other day. Will they just have enough goals in them? Is the thing. And if they go away from home, are they able to not have the performance they did against Everton, where they didn't turn up at all? The City thing is interesting. It's up to Guardiola to maybe look to the 3 to 4 people in his dressing room, like De Bruyne, Gundogan, Diaz, Rodri, and rely on them. But it is odd that Haaland doesn't get the ball. Nobody. Someone's like a kid in school. Oh, no, we're not passing to you.
Because every time we do, you score a goal.
Yeah, man. So it's a bit of that about it. But I still think like the problem for Guardiola is Guardiola has been trying to boost his team in a lot of his recent utterances. It's all about the Champions League for him. Whether if they don't win the Premier League but they win the Champions League, it's still everything is achieved.
Did I hear you sneaking in there? I think Tottenham's name is on the trophy. That was like a little Trojan horse there. You just snuck it in and moved on. So you think Spurs are going to win the FA Cup? Bob Dwyer pointing out here, last time Spurs beat Portsmouth in the third round was 1991.
There you go. Well, I don't think it was the third round. I think it was later than that, Bob. But because it was Gascoigne scored twice when we came from behind.
Come with the king, you best not miss, Bobby.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it was the fifth round or the quarter final. It was at Fratton Park.
You're going to win a trophy, John.
I think Mark Chamberlain scored the opener for Portsmouth. I think he's Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's dad.
Is he?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And if I'm wrong, I'm the bad.
We've literally accidentally stumbled into John Duggan's mastermind round. Tottenham Hotspur's 1991 FA Cup victory.
They beat Blackpool in the first round away from home.
Rounds
then they
3-7.
Oxford United, Notts County, Portsmouth. I actually think Portsmouth was the fifth round, Notts County was the sixth round, Arsenal was the semi-final, and then they beat Forest in the final.
You're right, John, by the way. He is Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's. He's also a younger brother of Neville Chamberlain, not the former British Prime Minister.
But it wasn't bad, was it? That's where that Gaza clip at the start of the football show comes from, after that semi-final free kick. Right?
Would that be your actual football mastermind subject? Or sporting
well, I mean, I'd like to think I've got many strings to the bow. If you ask Nathan and Joe what the Masters quiz is like every year.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. The two lads are like suddenly something's crawling down the back of their neck and they're scratching it away going, what happened?
You got Cheltenham as well, John, I suppose.
There's a few things. Although I'm not a very good go-karter, because I see the story here at the back of the Times. Spurs Formula 1 deal sparks sale talk about they're going to build a karting track underneath the sad stand at Tottenham. Liberty Media.
Is there nothing there at the moment? Is there just like a big empty hangar where they can build a go-kart track?
I just have no idea how they're going to do that. Maybe they'll have an underground tunnel or something like that.
Stories, isn't there? There's levels to underneath the pitch.
I just kind of thinking of Mario Kart. I remember I'm so bad at this that about 25 years ago I was brought karting in Colmore or Phibsborough, one of these places in the north side, with a friend who's really good. Like, he's a really good driver. And he was like, he got a hang of it and he was spinning around. He's going around and around thing. And every single lap, I just kept on going into the tyres. So much so that the guy came up to me and goes, no, we're not doing this anymore.
Do you know why that is, John? Do you know why you kept going to the tyres? And this is shots absolutely fired. Dubs can't drive.
Right.
They don't know how. They never learn. We, like, Colchi, I call myself a Colchi, I'm from a town, but we were in the fields at 14, 15, learning how to drive cars.
Doing donuts.
Yeah, 100%.
Have you done karting?
Done karting as well. I love a bit of karting, yeah. We were down in Mondello, myself and
Ger.
That wasn't karting.
That wasn't karting. That was
cars.
Proper
they were
cars.
BMWs.
But yeah, Dublin people out there, would you ever feckin' learn to drive? It's not that hard. I did my test at 17.
That's your challenge, JD, for this year, right?
Yeah, that and swimming.
There you can't swim either.
No. A lot of things, I'm a very unconventional man.
Well, it's just... And you're always on Killiney Beach as well, so you never know. Just stay on the shore, John.
Stay away from that water.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else, briefly?
Sad news about Brian O'Brien passing away, 83 years of age, really popular man with the Irish rugby squad, so and the first ever Shannon player to play for Ireland, so may he rest in peace. And yeah,
a great legacy for sure. John, good stuff. More from John, of course, on Saturday afternoon and Off the Ball on News Talk. It is 8:59, OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish today. Here's what's on the OTB podcast network for you today. Brian O'Driscoll, exceptional on last night's Monday Night Rugby? It was last night? Tuesday night?
Tuesday.
What day? It was Tuesday.
Tuesday night special.
Talking specifically about the defensive brilliance of Gary Ringrose. So make sure you make time to listen to that. Graham Hunter was on previewing the Clásico in the Copa del Rey semi-finals, and they're going to play again in La Liga soon as well. So the season in Spain is telescoping. We also had the latest episode of the Koi Gig podcast where Kathleen, Karen Duggan and Emma Byrne discussed the most recent international window and Emma's time at the FIFA's Best Awards. She's got quite the life on the FIFA circuit at the moment, our Emma. So you can listen to that in the Koi Gig podcast in its own stream or in the football stream. Follow Off the Ball across our social channels and make sure you subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network. Up next, Kathleen's WNT Power Rankings.
Watch OTB AM live every weekday morning from 7:30 on YouTube. Just subscribe to the Off the Ball channel so you don't miss a thing. OTB GAA.
I've slid Dublin back to one place to third. I didn't expect I'd do this. Ger, I kind of dismissed you last week. Put my hands up now. I'm not saying I'm infallible the way Owen used to say it.
Apology accepted.
The one thing that got me at the weekend was looking at the confidence of the Clare forwards. And I was like, there's no fear here.
No.
Teams don't fear Dublin anymore.
Subscribe to the OTB GAA podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts.
The Heineken Champions Cup is back. Leinster take on Ulster in the round of 16, Saturday, April 1st at 5:30 in the Aviva Stadium. Join the Sea of Blue for this massive inter-provincial clash. Tickets on sale now at leinsterrugby.ie. Terms and conditions apply.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Yeah, so the time is passing quickly. The World Cup is not quite nearly upon us, but we're getting there. Kathleen McNamee's back. Kathleen, good morning to you.
Good morning, guys.
With every passing week, any injury news is greeted with that, is that going to have an impact on the World Cup squad? But also with every passing week, some players are returning to fitness and getting game time and going, well, remember me? I should be in your team. So for newcomers to this slot, how does it work?
So we've updated a little bit for this week. So this is what I would say is my starting squad, and then also who I think is going to make the squad in general. Few changes, few movers, a little bit different to last time where if the 1 to 11 I had picked last time was a starting squad, it would have been a very interesting squad. But yeah, so we have our starting team, and then I don't know, you say about people getting playing time. This has kind of been one of the issues and probably why this is a bit more of a educated look at the team than the last one we did, because I actually got to go out to Spain and see the team playing, because there's quite a few of these players who aren't playing for their teams at the moment, which makes Vera Pauw's life very difficult and mine very, very difficult doing this lot.
So you're not picking Vera's team, you're picking your team. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't think this is how Vera is going to set the team up, but if I had my ideal world, this is kind of what I would like to see from the Irish team.
All right, let's be having you.
So Courtney Brosnan in goal. I don't think there's really any questions there. Backline, we have Aoife Mannion, Louise Quinn, Niamh Fahey, Megan Campbell. Midfield, Heather Payne, Rusha Littlejohn, Megan Connolly, Katie McCabe. And then up front, we have a bit of Ciara Carusa and also Denise O'Sullivan.
Okay. So Katie McCabe's on the left wing. You've got 4 at the back.
Yeah, so Vera prefers a 5 at the back a lot of the time. And I don't know, it's like what we saw last week with Spain was that, again, defensively, we're very, very strong. We were putting a lot of balls up to Heather Payne up top, who is like a very good runner, but doesn't necessarily have a great shot on her. So I feel like there's other places where she could perform well for this team. And at midfield, it was very difficult for us to really get the ball at all. So this is why I've kind of went for a little bit of a stronger set in the middle.
What was the reaction in Spain, in Marbella, to the Megan Campbell long throw-ins? I'm sure not everyone there had maybe seen her before.
It was quite funny because I think the owners of the stadium were sitting just in front of me, and it was the first time they'd ever seen it, and there was literal gasps and like oohs whenever she did it the first time. And there was very few people in the stadium, and anyone who was there was Irish, and everyone was just very entertained by their reactions.
We should absolutely stop doing it until actually the World Cup, right? So in the 2 friendlies against America, don't do it once.
Yeah, this is what I was going to say, because she was asked about it just before the Germany game, and she was saying, yeah, it is something we're working on, and yes, people do know that it is one of our I suppose, skills that we have in our bag of tricks. But like China defended against it very well, and it wasn't all that difficult for them either. So like people definitely know we do have it there, and I just wonder what would the reaction be if she went up and maybe took a short throw in and changed things in a little bit just to give that element of surprise, or at least tell teams every time you see Megan Campbell going to the line, it's not definitely going to be a long throw in.
You can't really prepare for, even if you know it's coming. It's tough to practice defending that. Like it's the trajectory is so fierce. All it needs is a touch from the opposite.
We need a Rory Delap, Megan Connolly mashup where they actually speak to each other on this show. That's our. We need to get that sorted in the next couple of weeks to be like, here, listen, because there was a point where it becomes. There's just, like, as you say, like, I'm interesting to hear China were able to do that. How often did it happen, and what was the...
I think she did it about 3 or 4 times during the game, but like it was very simple defense in the end from them, because all they had to do was just pack out the box, make sure any of the players who you were likely to go through. So if she was trying to aim it for Louise Quinn's head, say, all they had to do was put an extra player on her, and they were very physical, in fairness, China, so they were quite good at that sort of box defense.
Right.
But even in the WSL, the few times she's used it, like, not that I haven't been playing the last couple of weeks because it's been an international break, but before that you can see teams are slowly coming around. Like initially when they came up to the WSL, they did find it hard to defend against it, but I feel like people are slowly...
I think the thing to do, not just to like throw it at the goal and hope someone gets a touch.
Just get
well, the last time we tried that, she did actually score a goal.
But that was the problem. Nobody got a touch.
Yeah.
Now, like if the preordained here is like just get any owl touch on it.
Is it treated like a corner by Vera? Like do they just leave 2 or 3 players back and just swarm the box? Is that how they approach it?
Well, see, this is the kind of issue with it, because it is treated like it's a way for us to score rather than developing, say, our attacking players. And it's why this team is slightly more attacking than, like, I imagine Vera Pauw would set us up. That she treats it like a set piece, and that's generally how we are most likely to score, and it's something that's probably not going to suit us all that well when we actually get to the World Cup. So generally she aims it for a player like Louise Quinn who can jump up and head it into the net. It's not really ever one that's aimed for people's feet, because I think A, that's a lot easier to defend against, and B, it just leaves a bit of a scramble in the box rather than, you know, if we have a free kick or a corner where we know we have those aerial players who are quite good.
You had Kira Carusa in your starting team. She got a deadline day move to London from Denmark, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Interesting enough pick?
Yeah, so I was a little torn on this. So the options were kind of Kira Carusa, Amber Barrett or Leanne Kiernan. And Emma and I were actually talking about this outside just before we came in, and I was saying that if Leanne Kiernan was fit, I would probably have her in that position, because I think she is one of the few out-and-out strikers that we actually have in the Irish team who can get goals. She was doing it for Liverpool in the Championship last season. Before she got injured, she was doing it for them in the WSL. Obviously, she has been injured the last couple of months and had a couple of setbacks, so playing time is going to be a bit of an issue. And also Vera Pauw doesn't really fancy her. Even when she has been fit, she rarely makes it into the team, which I've always found really interesting. But what I like about Kira Carusa is I think she has the work rate of a Heather Payne. She's very good on the ball. She's a little bit more physical than Heather Payne. She has that sort of temperament that she's played in the US, so she has that level of athleticism that maybe some of the players who've only played here and in Europe don't. And also she has a shot. And I think sometimes we forget about her a little bit, because she did play over in Denmark for those few years, and then she was over in the US, so she's not always top of people's minds.
Do you think she's going to start?
No, I think Vera Pauw will probably stick with Heather Payne up there.
Okay.
Even though I don't agree with it. And
okay.
I don't think it's her her best position.
She's Vera Pauw's not going to pick forward to back either, is she?
No, she's going to go 5.
Okay.
She's never changed that. That's always been her go-to. Even when she says she's lining up before the back, it still ends up with being 5.
So of your team, of your starting 11, what is the number of those who will start in the opening fixture in the World Cup? Everybody, assuming fitness, against Australia?
I think the majority there is probably, like, I really think that will be our back line. I think Aoife Mannion showed...
So Aoife Mannion is actually playing centre back?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think she showed against against China that she has that level of being able to hold onto the ball if she's in a tight corner against the line, she can actually hold the ball and move away from the player rather than just kicking it out. And I think that's something we miss sometimes in our back line. I think Heather Payne will move up front. I think Ruesha, if she stays fit and she gets a few more minutes, definitely will be in there. Megan Connolly, I would love seeing back in midfield. I don't think she's great in defence, and I also don't think that she herself really likes playing there all that much. I talked to her a bit about it last week in Marbella. Katie and Denise are obviously surefires. Other players that might get in, Lily Agg maybe for Ruesha if she's not fit enough. And apart from that...
Okay.
I mean, I think it's a pretty set team. This is our thing, that like our starting 11 doesn't actually change around too much. It's more just when you go down the list a little bit, there's not maybe a massive amount of depth.
Okay, so you've picked your bench and the rest of the squad who will go to the World Cup in your view, right? Are there any controversial omissions from this bench?
Not massively, I don't think. I mean, one of the players that dropped out from one of the players I brought in is Claire Walsh, who plays in Glasgow. So she's a defender, and I think she's an interesting player. She is a bit like Aoife Mannion in the sense that she's quite good on the ball, a sort of player that has a bit of pace and can actually play out from the back. And I actually, when I hadn't included her last time, she was on my maybe list. But I just hadn't watched a whole lot of her. Marissa Shiva is possibly a controversial inclusion. I thought when she first came on last week, she was nervous for the first couple of minutes, but she was just so pacey and she had a lovely turn on her when she was on the ball. That was kind of like one of the players that when we were talking about earlier, if she makes the squad, maybe some people will feel aggrieved by. I don't think, Aoife Mannion, it's hard to debate her getting a place there, whereas Marissa Shiva, I think people may feel a little bit annoyed at a player like her, unless she proves something. There is still a couple of international windows for her to prove something. And we're playing the US next, which is where she has plied her trade. So maybe
good opportunity for somebody to make an impact in those two games. If you play well in those two games, it's going to be hard for Vera Pauw to ignore your claims for a place, at least on the plane, but also maybe potentially for a place in the team. Yeah,
I think a place in the team is going to be difficult at the moment unless it is someone gets injured in that starting 11 that's there. I think a lot of those players are pretty set on. Again, maybe Lily Agg or someone could also make a claim, but maybe in defence, maybe there might be a little bit of room there. But I think the thing about this team is that, like we were saying earlier, it's very difficult to actually move players around because so many of these players have been stalwarts for so long, and it's very hard to leave any of them out. And to make that claim, you do need a certain level of really, really playing well. And I think it was interesting actually with Aoife Mannion after she played last week. She got her first start for United in since last February was the last time she played proper minutes with them. And Mark Skinner was saying after the game that was partly because of how she played for Ireland. So
great.
Yeah.
Okay, so on your bench you've got Lily Agg, Amber Barrett, Marissa Shiva, Leanne Kiernan, Jamie Finn, Anya Gorman, Claire Walsh, Lucy Quinn, Chloe Mustaki, Diane Caldwell, Grace Maloney and Megan Walsh. Who's not on that bench that is in potential selection area?
I think you probably have to look at some of the WNL players. Your likes of Jessie Stapleton, again, still quite young. Abby Larkin, I did have in my first squad, but I saw her play last week and I wasn't massively impressed. Now she is still very young, she's only 17, but it felt like every time she did something kind of relatively small or relatively normal on the ball, she was getting a massive amount of encouragement from the team, and she looked like she needed that massive amount of encouragement from the team, because there wasn't that many people in the stadium, you could actually hear what the players were saying very, very clearly. So that's why she dropped out. I think Isabel Atkinson, if she gets a bit of time, could also be in a shout. And then, of course, you have the likes of Ciara Grant, Rihanna Jarrett, if she does something for Wexford, if she gets back into her scoring form, could also be there. But I think outside of those, it's going to take either a big push or else someone else coming in from that we don't know of that has an Irish passport.
Is there any rumours of that stuff? I mean, obviously they say they're continuously looking to improve. Is there an expectation that we might?
Yeah, so there's John Fallon in the Examiner reported last week that there's 2 other players that Vera Pauw is looking at. Megan Finnegan, who is a defender with Everton, and also Sophie Whithouse, who's a goalkeeper with Lewes in the Championship. So interesting that a goalkeeper is being looked at, because we probably would have thought that those 3 were pretty set on, but also Grace Maloney and Megan Walsh haven't been getting a lot of time this season, although Grace Maloney was the penalty hero at the weekend for Reading in the FA Cup when they knocked out Tottenham, so she could be on her way back.
So you take her on at the end of extra time in a World Cup game just for the shootout, is that what you're saying?
No, I'd leave Courtney there. I think Courtney has proven that she is good enough to be there, even if she's not playing with Everton at the moment all that much.
Kathleen, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
That's Kathleen McNamee giving us her power rankings ahead of the Women's World Cup. If you have any thoughts on that, you can get us on youtube.com/off the ball. It's 15 minutes past 9. I'm delighted to say we're turning to athletics now ahead of the European Indoor Athletics, which are going to be fast and furious over the next few days. And I'm delighted to say Phil Healy is with us. Phil, good morning to you. How are you?
Hey, how are things? Thanks a million for having me on.
What part of the world are you in at the moment?
I am currently in Waterford, still in the gym after training this morning, but yeah, I'm here.
When are you heading off?
I leave on Friday, so the Europeans actually start on Thursday evening. I know the 1500 metre boys are on Thursday evening, and then the relay is on Sunday for me, Sunday evening.
And so the decision for you to just be a part of the relay team this time, what goes into making a decision like that for you?
Look, it definitely was a hard decision because I've gone to an indoor major championship every year since 2016, and COVID year in 2020 was the only year that it wasn't on. So I suppose that's a tough decision to make when you're there year after year. The last time we had European Indoor Championships was 2021, and I finished 4th there. So now it has come around where my body isn't where I want it to be. I'm not running the times where I want it to be. So I knew I wasn't going to give the best performance individually, and it certainly wouldn't be at my standards of going out there in a European Championship. So I wanted to save it for the relay and give the best shot that I can for the relay. And I suppose you just have to go away from that individual mindset. Like, we're individual athletes all the time, and like, we rarely have a relay together. So I suppose it is a hard one to make, but for this championships, it's all about the team.
Again, you make the point there that you're an individual athlete, so it's really difficult to step out of that for a moment and go, okay, that must be very disappointing at one level.
100%, because even if I qualified for European Championships last year, like the qualification window opened in 2022, and I was running 51 second 400 meters after 51 seconds. And like, if I look at the rankings for the championships this year, I was running 51.6 last year. That would rank me 4th or 5th going into this championship. But this is sport. This is the way it rolls. Not every year is going to be a good year. And yeah, it is a hard decision, but at least I am injury free. And I suppose that is the main thing, although there is a few health things going on. And I suppose that can be more frustrating and less clear, I suppose, and frustrating as an athlete. But yeah, it was a decision we had to make. And yes, we could have shied away from the European Championships altogether, but this is a great opportunity for a women's 4x4 team. It's the first time we have a women's 4x4 relay in European Indoor Championships since 2010, I think. So it's a massive opportunity. We have 2 new girls making their senior debut as part of the team, and the squad is growing year after year. So it's great to see everybody is stepping up and everybody is keeping each other on their toes. So we're fighting for those places, and it's great to see women 400 metre sprinting in Ireland going to new levels as well.
You said it was a tough decision, of course, Phil, but it also strikes me as maybe a mature decision. Like when athletes are coming through at 17, 18, there's maybe an eagerness and a willingness to maybe push the body to places it shouldn't be going, whereas now you're obviously more in tune and I guess more accepting of what it can and can do at certain times of the year.
100%, and I suppose you just have to take that step back. And for me, after coming 4th in 2021, like, a final is obviously the main goal again, and I know my body is nowhere near even probably getting to a semi-final if I wanted to compete individually. So like, I'm only setting myself up for failure, and I'm exposing myself in that environment where I don't need to, where I can go in, run the relay, give the best possible leg over that 4x4 distance for the relay team, go away from the championship, start again, and look forward to outdoor season. Hopefully things are back firing the way they should be.
And when do you feel like you'll be back to yourself?
I suppose for me, like, the winter was very frustrating, and I didn't have the answers of what was actually going on. There was a few different things, like my white blood cells and things were all over the place. But yesterday, I actually had a consultant appointment in Beaumont, and I finally got more clarity and I finally got answers. So I suppose it's just about adjusting to those changes now and treating what I need to treat, because I do have thyroid issues and I do have an autoimmune disease with that. So we do have a lot of tests coming up in the next few weeks to rule out any other autoimmune diseases. And I suppose for the athlete, no athlete wants an injury ever in their career. But for me, at one point it was nearly easier if it was an injury, because at least I would have had a set road to recovery and you have answers. But there was a point in the winter where I did contemplate, like, should I stick with the sport? Should I not stick with the sport? And I know some of the listeners are probably like, God, that's so dramatic. It is only sport at the end of the day, but it is also your career at the end of the day. Yes, I do have a full-time job on the side, and people were saying that, oh, because the performances weren't coming out, it's because you've changed and started working full-time. But I'm like, if only you actually realize behind the scenes, that is not the case. And the job for me has been a great balance, has been a great change. But yeah, there was a point where I did think, maybe my time is done in the sport. Maybe it's not worth going at it anymore. And like, I suppose if you're in any career, any profession, and you're not performing day after day, you're like, why am I staying in this? Why I'm not enjoying it? So like, there was that point, and I did stick with it, and hopefully things are coming around in the right way. And like, obviously it's easy to share the highs day after day, but the lows are important to share as well. It's just to be transparent, and I suppose to be honest. And I certainly wasn't looking for pity or anything like that when I did say that I was withdrawing from the 400. It was just, I have had a great run of it over the last few years, going to major championship after major championship and getting semi-finals, going to the Olympics and different things like that. But there does come a time where your body just isn't responding. And for me, that is now. And finally, I have got answers, and finally I can treat that. And hopefully things will come together again.
I don't know if you don't want to talk about this, that's totally fine. We don't need to, but it sounds like you've been on a journey of discovery to try and like get the science to be as exact as it possibly can. Like you talk about the level of competition that you're at. Every single second of every single day has to be measured out, and you're against the clock the whole time. So it's about measurement of even down to white cell count. It must be incredibly frustrating when you suddenly lose control over that.
100%, because there was a time where my bloods looked perfect, but still training was such a struggle. And for me, I know the ins and outs of training, and there's no fooling me in thinking that things are okay. And I suppose that makes me very hard to coach at times as well. But the reality was that training wasn't good enough. My body, even when we took the intensity out and we were doing the slower pace stuff in training, my body just was not responding. And I'm like, will I ever be back to being able to run properly? And I suppose you're performing and you're training at such an intense rate all the time. You need to be on top of your game all the time. Everything does need to be in a line. So I did have a great team around me. Shane, my coach, is always there, and then working with the doctors in UPMC in Waterford and Sport Ireland as well. It was great to have that and to try find answers. And yeah, we're on the road to recovery, and we're on the road to getting back there. And I suppose I just wanted to be clear on what was going on, because it hasn't just been the winter. It has been ever since I got COVID in March of last year. Things haven't been right. And I'm not one to share, like some athletes are out there and they're sharing that on their journey and all the tough times along the way. For me, I only shared it last week, but it has been a year of struggle. It has been a year of lacking consistency in training. And for me, performance is built on consistency week after week. And even if I look at the last year, that I'd come to training and one day is good, the next day is poor, and you don't know what way your body is on a certain day, and you're giving it 100%, and it's like, okay, it's not there today. And I suppose then when I went to European Championships last summer, I was certainly such a below par performance, but then I had the relay a couple of days later, and that was a good performance, and then I had the final of the relay, and that was a poor performance. So like, it's one day it's good, one day it's bad, but this is your body at the end of the day. You have to accept that you're not a robot and can compete day after day and perform at that level. And we just had to take a step back and see what was actually going on.
I think I remember speaking to you before, Phil. It was a bit after you'd broken your foot in 2019 at the training camp in Malta. And of course, this is a completely different health issue than that was. But does having those setbacks before build up a little bit of scar tissue and make this easier, or is it just adding to the frustration that you're having to be out of action again?
It does in ways, and I suppose when breaking my foot in 2019, I knew it was broken. I knew I couldn't run. I had the answers and I had a road to recovery. And I remember even saying to Shane a couple of weeks ago, I was like, when I came back from breaking my foot, I was actually running quicker, and now I have no injury and my body just isn't able. And it was so frustrating. So I actually think this time was more frustrating than ever, because no one could give me the answers of, is my body ever going to be back? Is a break, taking a few weeks off, the best of things? And I was like, right, if I take a few weeks off, there's probably a high chance I'll never come back again, because I was like, what's the point? And I know, like, when you're the athlete in that situation, you don't want to take a break. You want to keep going. You want to get your body back around, but sometimes maybe it is the best option. But yeah, it was so frustrating. And even say, like, throughout the indoors, I knew the indoor races were coming closer and closer, and I'm always someone that opens up really early in January and races throughout the indoor season. We had to cancel the races as they were coming closer and closer, and then we just had national championships, and I knew I needed to race to try and help the relay team qualify for the European Indoor Championships. Again, I could have shied away from competing at national championships because I knew the performance was not going to be at my desired standards, and I suppose I could have chose a different event and hid away a little. I could have done the 60, I could have done the 200, but I didn't want to. I wanted to go out there and give what I could do for the team. And because we had the European Championships, that was the main goal. And maybe if we didn't have the European Championships, maybe I would have scrapped it totally. But that was the position we were in. And we went out there and successfully together qualified for the European Indoor Championships. So I am looking forward to, I suppose, running with a team this weekend, and it takes the pressure away individually as well. And you can go into the championship and enjoy it, because it's not every day you're in a European Indoor Championship, so you have to take them as they come. And I suppose as athletes, we're literally rolling from one thing to the next. Like when I came fourth 2 years ago, you're straight on to outdoor season. You don't actually stop and enjoy the good times, and you see that when the hard times roll around. So it definitely makes you appreciate that you do need to stop and enjoy the good times when they are there.
That individuality of athletics is massive, and it's so important, I guess, from your perspective then to talk to people. And I know, like we spoke on the show before, the boxers or golfers, or Ronnie O'Sullivan has even spoken about the impact Steve Peters, his psychologist, has had with him. Has that been something that you've leaned on or decided to lean on in recent years, the whole psychological aspect of the sport?
100%. And like, I have a great sports psychologist, Kira Losty, who I work with all the time, and she has been there right since I started working with Kira in 2017. So like, we've come through all the highs together, and now we have to come through the lows of this, and she's been super. And like, she's dealt with so many other athletes, so she's been there and she knows how I am struggling and how I am feeling. And like, end of the day, the mental side of things is so important and has to be valued, because you have that mental fatigue as well. And say, like, for me, if I'm going out day after day and I'm trying to look for markers and training, and as much as you want to ignore and just turn up and train, you're still looking for that little confidence boost. And if it's coming day after day and you're not getting it, you're like, oh God, what's actually happening here? So that's 100% a massive, I suppose, element of sport, and people should definitely dabble into it so much more, because I can train day in, day out and be 100% perfect, but if that mental side isn't 100% perfect either, then you're not going to get the desired performance overall.
Phil, do you think you had a touch of long COVID?
That was something that was investigated as well, and I suppose there's not enough research there at the moment, but I'm still doing ongoing tests to see that. But the thyroid is definitely the one at the moment that has constantly been bouncing all over the place, and even since I started in athletics, it's always been an issue for me when I was younger and in my teens as well. So I have been put on medication now for it to just trial it, and I suppose see can we get it under control, because I have enough data there to show that it has been an issue over the last few years, and I do have thyroid antibodies as well for those listening and understand that. So like there's a family history of it there for me as well, and it's something that I do have to trial, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, then we have to explore other avenues.
The bit you talked about starting a job full time, we've had countless athletes come into us over the years who invested all of their time exclusively into the athletic career, and at the end of it found that they hadn't fully developed the rest of their life, and that ultimately not having something to fall back on led to too much pressure, and so they ended up underperforming at key moments, unconnected to the fact that they weren't training enough because they weren't full-time. It was actually they were full-time and nothing but that, and then come the moment they were like, oh, this is all I have in my life. For you, that scales of I think Jim Gavin always used to refer to the glass balls in your life. You seem to have managed that over the last while. That sounds like it's been a comfort to you over the last couple of months in particular.
100%, because I've always said sport isn't going to last forever, and like the winter definitely made me realise that. And for me, my career side is just as important as the sporting side. So ever before I started the full-time job, I was completing my master's in WIT. I continued to do add-on modules. My career is in software engineering, so I'm working for a company in Waterford at the moment, and it was something that I wanted to start. I wanted to make that change. Like for me, it's working from home. It's ideal. The office is only 5 minutes away as well. So it is perfect to have that balance. And I suppose it's that security as well. Yes, I am a funded athlete and I have made my income off sport, and it has been my career for the last few years. But if you're not performing, you're suddenly going to be dropped very quickly. And you have to think as well, long term, like you're not going to make a fortune off sport, and certainly not off athletics as well. So you do have to think long term about financial security. And I suppose that 100% was a massive security blanket for me during the winter, and a comfort, because even when I did contemplate, right, can I keep going in the sport? And like for me, I suppose other years I would have thought sport is my identity. Yes, I am funded, as I said, but that financial security wasn't there long term. So now it's like, right, I have a full-time job. I have that financial security if I do stop in the sport, and I can move on with my life and I can move on with my career. So it definitely was 100% that comfort there. But for me also, when I used to go away from the track, I used to go back to work, and it was a switch off from the track. You're not in your head 24/7, and it was a great balance, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it certainly hasn't been a performance impact. It probably has helped more than anything to create more of a balance there, and it's definitely a change that I am glad that I have made. And I didn't want to be, so I'm 28 now. If I go to Paris Olympics, I'll be approaching 30 in that winter, and I didn't want to be 30 and starting my career then. I didn't want to be at the bottom of the ladder. So for me, it was about starting now, gaining that experience. I suppose I've been in a very lucky position where I haven't had to start, and being financially able to continue the sport through the years. So no, it has been a brilliant change, and it certainly hasn't been performance impacting that some might think. But there just has been a lot of other things going on behind the scenes that I finally, I suppose, have shared and given a bit of transparency towards.
That's fascinating that you've had that attitude, Phil, because we speak to a lot of recently retired sports people on the show and Saturday panels and all the rest, and they struggle with that, being an ex-rugby player or an ex-footballer or an ex-Gaelic footballer or hurler, whatever it might be. So the fact that you're already thinking about that, and not wanting to be tagged as just Phil Healy, the athlete. I think I remember hearing you before as well, even disliking the Ireland's fastest woman tag. So that's obviously something that you actively think about, these tags not defining your life.
Absolutely, and you have to, because as I said, sport isn't going to last forever. We never know when it's going to end, and your life has to move on. So it is so important to have that backup plan, and that's why I wanted to keep going with my masters while I was training, so that I did have that fallback if it did ever end. And it is so important for other athletes, no matter what sports, to have that there. And I suppose it's not possible in all situations. But for me, yeah, like, yes, you're out there, you're exposed, you're in the media as the athlete, but not every day is going to be a good day. And yeah, like, as you say, with the tags as well, for me, I just see myself as me, an athlete going out there performing. Yes, I did have national records before. It's great to see Rashida absolutely smashing those records and going to a whole other new level to show what can be done in Irish athletics. And it's great to see for everybody coming up as well. So yeah, overall, for me, it is about career development, both on the track and off the track, and it's an important aspect to take care of.
When you made the decision to send the message out about not running in the individual in the Europeans, it was obviously a big deal. Like, I'm actually going to start talking about this and I'm going to share my story. How do you feel now that you've shared it?
I'm actually very glad that I did, because I suppose anybody can share the good days, and we love posting on Instagram when we have a great performance and we run great times when we're at European Championships or World Championships or whatever it is. And it's easy to share those days. But like, I always remember Sinead Galvin, who looks after all of my PR stuff, said that you have people following you. You have people invested in your career, and they're there to support you. And I suppose I had the opportunity to speak to media before nationals, and I didn't want to, because I didn't want it to be like, oh, she's setting herself up and she's making excuses already before she hasn't even performed, and she's looking for that pity. For me, I didn't want any of that, because you are going to have people who understand, and you are going to people that don't actually understand as well. So for me, I just wanted to go out there, do what I could at nationals. Going in, I knew it wasn't going to be where I wanted to be. Like, I have a very high bar, and when things aren't good enough, I know they certainly aren't good enough. But the outpouring of support after it has been unbelievable, and I suppose people appreciated the honesty and the just being open as well, because, as I said, everybody can share the good days, and it's life, it's reality. Not every day is going to be a good day, so we have to realise, and I understand that I'm only talking about sport here, and there's far bigger issues going on, but in the end of the day, it is my career.
Yeah,
it's my health involved and different things like that. So I am glad that I did share it, and to be open. And I suppose because you are critiqued, you are out there for people to make judgment, but without people actually understanding what is going on, they can say what they want as well.
Yeah, I think it's showing real leadership to take the opportunity, and it was a really excellent point about there are people out there who will support you and who are emotionally invested in your career, because we've watched it develop and flourish, and we're all dying to see you back running at the rate that you can. There's a good piece with Sinead Kazan in the papers today talking about your sister. There's a possibility there could be 2 Healys in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great to see. And Joan's actually in Istanbul as well. So she is running the 60 on Friday. So it's super to see. We were both there in 2021. Joan has a lot of injury setbacks through the years. So it's super to see that she is going to the European Championships. And there was a point as well where she thought she was going to be finished her career at 30. She's now 30. She's going to her second European Indoor Championships. She just ran a PB last year. She's running quicker than ever. So it's brilliant to see. So hopefully as the summer goes on, she will be at World Championships and Paris obviously in 2024 as well.
Who was faster in the back garden though? It was kids, Phil. That's the big question.
It was 100% her. She's actually the only reason that I joined the sport, because she led the way. She was the one winning everything, and I only joined the athletic club to keep her company. So I was definitely a late developer, and she was the one shining through at the younger ages.
The 4x400 is absolute hardcore. It's carnage on the track. Like, you need pointy elbows.
Absolutely, and it's even more carnage indoors. So it is fun. It's entertaining for everybody watching, and it's great to see that we do have a team there this weekend. And yes, we have the performance this weekend, but posting times and actually competing at this level has a knock-on effect for qualifying for World Relay Championships in 2024 and World Championships in the summer of 2023 as well. So it's great to see. We have 3 of the same team that were in Munich, and we have 2 new young athletes as well, which is super to see. They're making their debut, as I said earlier, and the depth in 400 meters is growing and growing. Obviously, unfortunately, we don't have Rashida for this championship because she is obviously smashing things over in the US and has her NCAA championships coming up. But no, it's great to see. We've obviously broke the national records outdoor last year. They stood for a long time. So the overall aim with all these championships and with all these 400 meter 4x4 relay is to qualify for Paris as well.
Well, listen, there's a green storm rising in Irish athletics, and I just want to say thanks very much for your openness and your honesty this morning. It's really inspiring. Best of luck this weekend.
Super, thanks a million.
That's Phil Healy there, Irish legend, giving us some thoughts this morning ahead of the European Indoors, which obviously get underway tomorrow. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. On tomorrow's show, Noz Chowdhury's You Had to Be There, John Duggan's Virtual Insanity. Well, obviously have a reaction to Liverpool and Manchester United and Arsenal in action tonight, and plenty more besides. Make sure you tune in to the evening show from 7 with Joe and the lads, who'll keep you up to date on the rest of the games. From now, some Graham Hunter goodness. Have a lovely day.
Main man, Graham Hunter, good evening, you're very welcome.
Joe, I've missed you so much. Good to be with you again.
We had a question in earlier on, we were just chewing the fat in here, and it was that dreadful question that you get asked sometimes, and my mind certainly goes blank, so I'm going to fire it your way, given that you are Mr. The Big Interview. Who is the favourite person? Pal. Who is the favourite person, your favourite guest on your show that you've interviewed?
Oh, will you stop?
It's the worst.
I need a week's preparation for that kind of stuff. But yeah. Listen, you introed that well. Look, well, I've been surprised. So recently, when I was down with Adam Lallana in Brighton, we were struck by his brilliant articulacy in describing Alexis McAllister. That made the hair stand up. Most recent of all, Martin O'Neill, whereby Martin's so popular. He's been around as a footballer and as a coach for so long. I didn't expect to hear things that stood out as new. It was more like, let's let him be eloquent on themes. No. He told me about being a young Northern Irishman in the Midlands of England in the middle 70s when the campaign from the IRA reached England, and in fact 48 hours before one of the 2 pubs that were bombed in Birmingham blew up. He'd been in there by total fluke with his brother and a teammate prior to watching a gig in Birmingham, and he'd missed that terrible tragedy by 48 hours, and he spoke about it beautifully. I could go on. Who stands out as the absolute best? One of the ones that will never leave me is Chris Waddle, for 2 reasons, Joe. And I know you didn't want the Iliad and the Odyssey from me in an hour's worth of answer. I know. But when Chrissy Waddle talked about growing up in Newcastle and having his mum's sister living in Watford, I asked him if he remembered watching the World Cup final in 1966. And he said, well, what we used to do to get to TV was my mum and dad had a big motorcycle and a sidecar. And I think it was mum and dad plus 3 kids, all on the motorbike and in the sidecar. And he said that roads, big main motorways were quite new then, and they genuinely were. So he said they were going at such a slow pace that they used to clamber over one another and change places without stopping on the drive down from, he was a tiny kid and 2 younger siblings, I think, clambering over one another. This genius of the game, this great man of the game. And also from Chris as well, being rooming with Gaza, and Gaza going out and buying crates full of eggs and waiting late at night in the team hotel they were in, because there was a what was then quite a new ATM cash machine about Chris described it as about 35-40 metres away. And Gaza would open the window beautifully and just take up the eggs and start pelting whoever's doing the ATM with a couple of egg sniper shots, and then closing the window and pretending nobody was there. And the final one, again, with Chris was him talking about loving particularly Sheffield Wednesday, where Hillsborough was old, the wooden seats would, if you stood up suddenly, the wooden seats would clack. And you could hear hundreds and then thousands. As he took a man on and beat him, you could hear hundreds of wooden seats in his mind going clack, 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 as people stood up going, go on, Chris. And then as he lost his way, as form departed and age caught up with him, he would hear nothing. And he talked about how depressing that was. And, you know, if you gave me the rest of the show, I could give you 70 highlights from the 135, 136 interviews. And all I would close this off by saying is the generosity of people to keep doing this as a favour. And 3 or 4 of our guests involuntarily have been reduced to tears. And the best thing of all, Joe, is a number of listeners who'll say, I've been having a really hard time recently. This must be the same for you with Off the Ball, that people can put their headphones in and lose themselves from their troubles and can feel lifted away from whatever is making them blue. And some people have talked to us outright about having come through depression and needed a place to go in their minds. And the interviews helped them. And, you know, I'll go from now to my grave when Gaz gets me with his Eggs Tonight We're Act. Been grateful for that feedback and that experience.
Yeah, we do get the same correspondence sometimes from listeners, and it's lovely, because there are definitely days, as important as sport is, where I drive home thinking, what the hell are we doing here? This is just silly, talking about this stuff so much.
Oh, that's because you're a grown-up man. I never do. No. That's literally because you've got a grown-up mind, and you're the years that we've known each other have established, you've got different priorities. I never, ever do that. I have better or worse days, but what sport is equal in human creation to opera, theatre, cinema, television, ballet. It just is. Sport is equal to and above all of that. Nobody ever say, I wonder if we should chuck this cinema thing, this opera, this ballet thing, and that flipping it. No, it's much more important to think about deficits and local budget, local council spending. Come on, Joe.
I hear you. I'm not saying we should stop sport. I'm just wondering if I need to talk about Man United's right back of a Tuesday every week. That's all.
I tune in to listen to you doing that.
I listened to that Waddle episode of yours, and it is just so good. And the way he describes Gaza pelting eggs out the window at unsuspecting ATM people is comedic gold. And like, naturally enough, as he said, Gaza's a crack shot. I mean, of course he is. He's Gaza.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't miss.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll give you a little anecdote now. When I first got a full-time job in the Scottish Daily Mail, having been a freelance for the Sunday Times for a few years, the first tour I was ever sent on was a Rangers tour of Denmark in the summer when they'd incorporated Laudrup and Gascoigne and Gorham was there and Goff and that. So we went on this mad, led by the late Walter Smith and Archie Knox. It was full of, unbelievable hilarity and anecdotes from Walter that would leave you genuinely helpless with laughter. One of the funniest men ever. But in the top of the hotel was a games room, and in those days, flipping it, Joe. You know, not only did we travel with them, we lived in the same hotel as them. And when it came to nicking up to play pool or table tennis, you could wander in, and if they were playing, you could put your 10 krona down and bag your game, or they would wander in it. I played both Gorham and Gaza at table tennis. And like you say about typically Gaza was an egg sniper supreme. It was like he had 8 arms at table tennis. It was, I was okay then. I was many years younger. I don't know how many years it is. Is that 27 years younger? I can't count. And other things I'm deficient at. But you picked up a bat and you thought, I'll give him a go. Make it difficult. I'll put some spin. I'll drop one over the net. Gaza was just everywhere. It was like 8 arms. It was like playing an octopus with skills. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I'll bet. It's so interesting how the relationship has changed there with journalists and players. And by the way, I will get on to what I want to talk to you about in a moment. But it was striking. Gareth Southgate certainly tried to build a bridge a couple of years ago and felt that might be of benefit. Clearly, his priority is the team. So of benefit to the team. Be that it might demystify the scary journalists, or maybe it might soften the criticism that would go in their direction if journalists, they're human beings as well, and they're like, God, I really like Jack Grealish when I play darts with him, so I won't criticise him quite as viciously. Do you think the modern generation have lost out on something by not having a fairly freewheely relationship with journalists, or do you think, you know what, they're well away from it, and actually all the blockades that are up now suit the player?
Well, typically, it's either one or another. It's a giant, big Gordian knot of a problem because you know the answer. And so your listeners are so well educated that, like, your shows in general, across my 21 years talking to you, your shows clinically represent what it used to be like between journalists, broadcasters, and sportsmen and women. Because there's a degree of intimacy, there's a degree of trust. The level of discussions or arguments that you have are not based on polemic. They might get heated, or they might get funny, or the anecdotes might be cutting, or somebody might share something emotionally stirring. But a lot of it is based on trust and mutual respect. And those are the things that have been lost. So it's quite patent if you could wave a magic wand, and I wish we could, and go back to those days, particularly, including the days of my predecessors. You know, it certainly didn't intimacy with sports people, nor the breakdown started in my era. It had begun earlier, but you know, my predecessors particularly enjoyed an extraordinary amount of friendship and knowledge, and players weren't rich, so journalists were viewed as people who could definitely help the profile, help them with sponsors. There weren't agents, which is before my time. There weren't agents, so journalists were used to tap up footballers and managers. And we've lost respect. We've lost mutual understanding. And every time I've been, you know, now over many tournaments, I've been in the same hotel or the same airplane as Spain, occasionally with Barcelona, many times with Manchester United. And when you can speak to players, and when they see that you're doing the miles and you're working hard, and at 3 a.m, you're loading your massive amount of kit cameras and lights and tripods and tons of material, and you're sweating and slogging at 3 a.m. to get from flipping, you know, Cape Town to Potchefstroom, their attitude towards you was a little bit enlightened. When training was open, and I know you're talking a little bit more about larking about with them, but when training was open, I spent half an hour talking to Luis Enrique about this 4 or 5 days ago. The idea that you could go in and watch what a coach was attempting to achieve with his drills, and you would just inevitably, when you're a good, bad, or indifferent journalist, you were capable of going away and writing in a far more accurate, educated way about what was being attempted, what the process was before a game came along.
Yeah.
So, but then we crapped on our own feet, didn't we? By every paper sent a journalist who had a big story and a splash story. That was true of journeys. That was true of hotels. But yeah, we've even if we as an industry now can't be trusted to resurrect that level, Joe. Not only have we lost out, those who listen or read have lost out, because we used to bring them a far greater degree of intimate access and accuracy and humour, and we were much more human in our description of these people.
I think that's very true, and the lack of access means that we're taking scraps and reading far too much into them. So at the moment, for instance, I haven't seen a single piece, not a single piece, tell me how Graham Potter's training sessions are going. But I have seen several dozen pieces tell me that Graham Potter is too reasonable or too nice or too normal and lacks an ego to be a big manager, because it's just based on this glimpse we get in a press conference or on the touchline. And as a reader, I read these pieces and say, you're giving me nothing here. And that is down to a lack of access. And that example is one of a gazillion day in, day out.
You take me back to what we try to do in the big interview, and I listen, whether I achieve it or I don't achieve it, it's what I try to do, and I'm writing for ESPN or talking to you, or Ger. I said it when I talked about opera and cinema and ballet and TV. Football in itself is deeply fascinating. We now live in an era whereby whether viewers and listeners and fans at games do or don't know more about football or understand more about football, every single one of them thinks they do. our terminology has changed dramatically over your and my career. The terminology that fans want to use. There are now people who are simply fans, not in our profession, who may well know much more about football tactics or training tactics, and there are all kinds of software packages that really lift their knowledge and their education gigantically. And therefore, like you said about this COD psychology that you will hear 10 a penny on Potter, which you won't know how to differentiate between the one article, which is actually well sourced about his personality or his feelings or what the players feel about him, and the 72 others, which are just guesswork.
Yeah.
Because the real stuff can easily be in there, but how would you tell?
It's true. So to the situation in Spain, which is pretty interesting just now, we have 3 Clásicos in 4 weeks upcoming. 1 in the league and then 2-legged Copa del Rey affair. And the weekend just gone was interesting. On Saturday, the Madrid derby was 1-1, and so Barcelona had the chance to go 10 points clear against lowly Almeria. They lost 1-0. The comments of Xavi jumped out. He said, "The defeat leaves me really angry. It was a day to make a statement in the league. There's no excuse. There was no intensity. There was not even a desire to win, and that worries me." So explain what's happening here at Barcelona, if we can say much is happening at all, but they're especially strong comments from Xavi.
Well, first of all, I think that for a 43-year-old manager in his first full season, again, what you talked about what's talked about is worth consideration, because he has done well. He's won a trophy. He's currently 7 points clear. All the things you talked about are completely true. Losing to Almeria for the first time in their history was bad. Madrid had been full of doom and gloom in drawing against 10 men Atleti on the Saturday night. It had been a marvellous opportunity for a flailing Barca, because in recent weeks they've lost a lot of impetus and confidence. Lewandowski is not playing well. Never mind the goals, he's not playing well. Pedri's injured, and Dembele's injured. So, focusing on Xavi, his words will prove to have been a little bit injudicious, because they were in the heat of the moment. Sometimes a real tongue lashing can change a dressing room, can make individuals waking up. And it was anger and it was pressure. He's been booked 3 times in recent games, never sent off, but he's been consistently booked. And in the background to what he's trying to do, which is take a squad which was a wasteland when he inherited it in November of 21. He's got them 7 points clear. They've won a trophy. When they won the trophy, they took Madrid to pieces. Over his time, they've beaten Madrid 4-0 at the Bernabeu. They've beaten Napoli. They've beaten Galatasaray. He's in his first 46 Liga games, Xavi has a record which is second best in Barca's history. 3 points less than Luis Enrique, and equal to Pep Guardiola in his first 46 Liga games, which was the season that they were going to... Pep had the vintage Messi, vintage Busquets, vintage Xavi, vintage Iniesta, Busquets, Piqué, Puyol, and they won the treble. And Xavi's stats in his first 46 La Liga games are equal to Pep's, exactly equal. And what you saw at the weekend, I'll split the end of the answer into 2 parts, is the tension of a Xavi who's got a club whereby they're in desperate debt. The financial fair play situation while Xavi's been manager has been hugely embarrassing for him to be able to register players, buy players, go through with promises about renewing contracts for players. That's embarrassing for him, but it's out with his control. La Liga recently told him, you're now another 200 million short of making financial fair play. There was a refereeing scandal erupted where the tax office have given what seems to be pretty clear proof that Barcelona as an institution were paying for information and advice and guidance on referees from a man who was the vice president of the refereeing committee at the FA. So all of this is going on, which is, once proven, is utterly scandalous. Xavi's in the middle of this maelstrom in his first full season in a senior club in Europe, an elite club, with all the pressure that brings. And I think that the words that you're talking, because I heard the inflection of a Carlo Ancelotti eyebrow raise from you, Joe. It was very similar. I think it wasn't just the result. Football can happen, but it was like WTF, Chabby baby? What's going on there? Pressure, I think, is the answer. He knows exactly what you've said, that Thursday night is the first leg of the Glasgow Cup semi-final. It's away. It looks very like, well, Dembele and Pedri won't make it. Lewandowski probably won't make it. And frankly, at the moment, that won't be much loss. And there are several players who, in the training system, which gives you a red light, amber light, green light on your training bib, there are 5 players, including Lewandowski, who are registering red numbers at the moment. And in other words, they shouldn't be playing and training as hard and playing a game every 3 days, which they are at the moment. That's unavoidable. So they've got problems. They've got really big problems. And what he can imagine coming is, well, if they don't manage to claw out a reasonable result in the Bernabeu, the pressure will go up. The people will utterly forget 7 points advantage in the league. They'll forget the Spanish Super Cup. They'll forget the stats about how his team has still only conceded. I mean, I think it's 8 goals in the league all season, which is the lowest total in any big league in Europe. Those will be chucked out the window. And Joe, I'd ask you and ask your listeners, in a balanced view of what's going on, should they be chucked out the window? Probably not. But we live in a very intemperate now society. And I think he's beginning to show that pressure, because I think he knows that if they could get a spanking on Thursday. They could. Not saying they will, but it's in the wind.
And is the Madrid that we saw at Anfield, not least that second half, where at times they were devastating, is that indicative of an improved Madrid of late, or where are they at the moment as they head towards the final few furlongs in this league race?
Yeah, well, they weren't very good against Atleti until the newest wonder kid, Alvaro Rodriguez. He's a brilliant story. Born in Catalonia, brought up in Catalonia. It looked like Barcelona just didn't see him under their very noses. Instead, what happened was his Uruguayan dad and he himself, Madridistas to the core. They were playing all their football an hour away from Camp Nou and the academy there. And he's like, no, Madrid.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar. Off the Ball Daily.
A home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball.